We are live.
Okay, thank you. Good evening and welcome to the virtual meeting of the Conceptual Review Board. The Ohio Legislature passed several emergency laws to address the pandemic, including the ability for public entities to have virtual meetings. For the present time, we are holding our meetings online and live streaming those meetings on YouTube. You can access the live stream on the city's website. The meeting procedure for each case this evening will begin with staff presentation, followed by an opportunity for the applicant to make a presentation. The board will then have the opportunity to ask clarifying questions prior to hearing public comments. Finally, the board will deliberate on each case. In order to submit any questions or comments during the meeting, please use the form under the streaming video on the city's website. These questions and comments will be relayed to the board by the meeting moderator. We want to accommodate public participation to the greatest extent possible and welcome your comments on cases. Please use a valid name and address when submitting your comments and refrain from making any inappropriate comments. This is not a perfect system, but we appreciate your patience. Okay, if you would show the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Judy, you can do roll call.
All right. Mr. Alexander?
Here.
Ms. Bryan?
Here.
Mr. Cotter?
Here.
Mr. Kanecki?
Here.
Ms. Cram?
Here.
Thank you. I have some comments on the minutes, and maybe it's because I wasn't there, but it seems that Mr. Schneer's name is frequently in this document, and it makes it sound like he's a board member. Was he a participant last month? Anybody?
He was not a participant,
Okay.
so if
So
that is the case.
In the minutes on page 5, 6, and 8, his name is mentioned. I think it was probably a mistake since he's on P and Z, but he is not on A or B. So I'm not sure who that should be, but those changes need to be made.
Great. We will make those changes, and if you're comfortable approving those documents otherwise, you're welcome to do that.
Okay. So with that, those changes, I need a motion to accept the documents into record and approve the meeting minutes from January 27th, 2021.
I'll make the motion to accept them with your amendments.
Thanks, Frank.
Second.
Thank you, Amy.
Mr. Kanecki?
Yes.
Mr. Cotter?
Yes.
Ms. Bryan?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Ms. Cram?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the Architectural Review Board is responsible for review of construction and modification or alteration to any site in the review district or area subject to architectural review under the provision of Zoning Code Section 153.177. The board has the decision-making responsibility on these cases. A swearing in of anyone who intends to address the board on any of these cases is necessary. Okay, so the agenda order is typically determined at the beginning of the meeting by the chair. Tonight, one case is eligible for consent agenda. Case 4, address 123 South High Street. Does anyone wish to pull the case off the consent agenda? Okay. All right. So then we will do swearing in of witnesses and staff. Anyone intending to address the board on cases this evening, please raise your right hand and answer in the affirmative. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony to this board?
We do.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, so we'll go to the consent agenda, or the consent case, 123 South High Street. This is a minor project in review, case number 21005 MPR. This application is a request for the installation of a new roof and repainting of a building on a 0.11 acre site, zoned Bridge Street, Historic South. The site is west of South High Street, 80 feet north of the intersection with John Wright Lane. Nikki? Is there anything?
Yeah, no, I don't think we have anything to add on this item this evening.
Okay, are there any public comments?
We have no public comments on this application.
All right. Is there any need to discuss this with the board? And there is one condition on this. The applicant, are you in agreement with the condition of approval?
Yes, I am.
All right. We can vote.
I'll make a motion to approve with the one condition.
Second?
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Mr. Konecki,
Yes.
Ms. Cram,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes.
Ms. Bryan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Have a good night.
All right, the next case is an informal review. Address is 72 through 84 North High Street. This application is a request for an informal review and feedback to construct a mixed-use building redevelopment of former Oscars site on an approximately 0.9 acre site zoned Bridge Street District Historic Core. The site is located northeast of the intersection of North High Street with North Street. Mr. Ridge will be our presenter. So whenever you're ready, Chase.
Okay, great. Can you see this okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay, well, as was mentioned, this is an informal review providing non-binding feedback on the redevelopment of the site located at 72 to 84 North High Street in the Historic District. So quickly as a reminder, informal reviews really allow an applicant to seek feedback from the Architectural Review Board on development proposals. So topics include, density, site layout, and architecture. The review process is really a three-step approval process. So informal reviews are optional. In this case, obviously the applicant opted to do one. Next step would be a concept plan, then a preliminary development plan and final development plan. So the site is highlighted in yellow on your screen. As was mentioned, it is approximately 0.9 acre site. It is located at the northeast corner of North High Street and North Street, and is zoned Bridge Street District Historic Core. This site is unique in that it has a variety of building styles and types surrounding it, as well as a variety of uses. So highlighted first here is building Z1. As you are likely aware, that is a mixed-use building containing residential units as well as commercial space up along North High Street. Building Z2 is the second highlight here, and that is, again, a mixed-use building immediately north of this site, which also includes a mix of residential and commercial spaces. The pedestrian bridge is northeast of the site in question, in that third blue box. And then with the bridge, there are landings on either side of the river as well. There are primarily single-family residential units to the southeast of this site. The Cohatch and former Brazen Head sites are immediately south of the site here. And finally, the Dublin branch of the Columbus Metropolitan Library is across the street on the west side of High Street. So to give you a little bit of more context here, provided photos of each of those items. So in the top left-hand corner, you've got building Z1. You can see kind of on the left-hand side of your screen, it starts off as a 2.5-story building and increases to 7 stories along North Riverview Street. Building Z2 is that bottom photo there. That is a 2.5-story building immediately north of the site. The pedestrian bridge, as I mentioned, is northeast of the site. And there are a number of single-family residential units to the south and southeast of the site. These really range from 1 story to 2.5 stories in height. And you can see these two pictured here are the first two to the site in question. And then finally, the new Cohatch building immediately south of the site is pictured on here. That has recently topped out at 3 stories. And then the Metropolitan Library is across North High Street there. So this is a more zoomed in aerial showing the greater context of the site. So as it exists today, the buildings are primarily located on the west side of the site along North High Street, and they wrap around in a C shape down to North Street. Pedestrian facilities are provided along North High Street, as well as a portion of North Street. And then you have the vehicular access is provided in the southeast corner of the site with the parking lot immediately behind the buildings here. I apologize. So these photos show some of the existing conditions of the site. In the top left-hand corner of your screen is the 84 North High Street building. On the bottom of your screen is, it includes both 72 and 84, but is closer up the 72 building. The photo on the bottom of your screen shows the existing 20 North Street building. And then on the right-hand side of your screen, highlighted in blue, is the rear of that structure. So really quickly, I wanted to provide an overview of what is in this presentation, so you know what to expect. First, I'll provide an overview, and then I'll get into the details of demolition, site plan, parking details, so on and so forth. So generally, this proposal is a mixed-use development requiring demolition of 3 buildings along North High Street and North Street. It is a proposal for a new 2.5 to 5.5 story building. Like I said, it's a mixed-use building containing residential, retail, restaurant, and event space. It does include a parking structure, which is primarily below grade, as well as open space in the form of a central courtyard. So as I mentioned, the proposal calls for the demolition of 72 to 84 North High Street, as well as 20 North Street. So these buildings were constructed at various points in the 20th century and underwent significant modifications in the 1980s. Partly due to those modifications, the buildings are recommended as non-contributing to the historic district. And the historic and cultural assessment gives poor integrity indicators for design, feeling, workmanship, and materials. So what you're seeing here is the proposed site plan. The applicant is proposing a single U-shaped building with the opening facing toward the Scioto River. The site itself, or the building, contains 2 primary wings. So you have a northern wing as well as a southern wing, and those are connected via a 2-story connector piece centrally located on the west-hand side of the site. The applicant is proposing patio dining on the west side of the site along North High Street, as well as a public plaza. And then a central courtyard is proposed centrally on the site and between the 2 wings, and the public would have access to that courtyard. So with this proposal, the applicant is proposing, as I mentioned, a primarily below grade parking structure with 80 parking spaces. These next few numbers are very preliminary and more research will need to be done, but to accommodate residential, restaurant, and retail spaces, what's required per code would be approximately 110. And that does not include the event space, which is proposed, and that requires 1 space per 6 people per the maximum capacity in the largest seating area. So it would be 110 spaces in addition to what's required for event space. Next, I'll talk about the proposed character of the structure. So what you're seeing here is the west elevation. This is what you're going to see from North High Street. You can see the building is formed using a series of front gables as well as side gables. The applicant is proposing a number of dormers on this elevation. You can see on the northernmost portion as well on the as well as the southern portion. The applicant is proposing what presents as a 2.5-story minimum building, whereas code permits a maximum of 2.5 stories. And you'll see in the next few slides that the applicant is proposing a taller structure as you move to the east. On this elevation, you'll notice that the applicant is proposing what appears to be stone on the first floor, as well as brick and a wood siding, all of which are permitted primary materials. On the south elevation, so this is along North Street, the applicant is proposing a building that increases to approximately 3 stories in height toward the east. The applicant is proposing several forms here that are broken up using architectural recesses. You'll notice that a series of dormers are proposed on this elevation as well as balconies for the residential units. You'll notice here on this elevation as well, there is a pedestrian post in the center of the building, and this would provide access to the central courtyard. What you're seeing here is the east elevation. So this is along North Riverview Street. Here you can begin to see the 2 distinct wings. So you have the southern wing on the left-hand side of your screen, and then the northern wing on the right-hand side. You'll also notice the increase in height here. So we went from 2.5 stories to a full 5-story massing at the rear. The applicant is proposing to clad this elevation in a mix of stone, brick, and an undetermined third material. So those details obviously would be worked out should this move with a formal application. And then also on this elevation, you'll notice the entrance to the underground parking, as well as the utility bays in that bottom right-hand side of your screen. And then this image is that same elevation as well as a portion of the north elevation as viewed from the pedestrian bridge. As was mentioned, the applicant is proposing a central courtyard, which would be accessible to the public. A series of stone-clad staircases are proposed leading from the higher elevation along North High Street down to a landing toward the east end of the site. And with this, the applicant is proposing a mix of seating options as well as various landscape elements in the landing. So with that, there are a number of recommended discussion questions. I am happy to answer any questions you all may have. The applicant is also in attendance tonight. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We've got, I don't know about your screens, but I've got like flickering going on. Does anybody else have that? No, okay. Must
No,
be.
no problem.
All right, good. So does the applicant have any, a presentation or any comments before we start questions?
Dwight, you're muted.
Keep up with that. I'm sorry. Yeah, we'd like to quickly run through a little more detail. There's illustrations, and we would presume that you all have seen the package that was submitted originally and the narrative that went along with that. So we don't really want to go through all that detail again. We presume that would have generated a lot of questions on your part, and we're here to be good collaborators and listen to your thoughts. We do have Jonathan Grubb with us tonight too. Jonathan's with Architectural Alliance, who is our architect on the project. We've been we've been at this now for almost 2 years from the time that we first had some dialogue with city staff about this and the potential of looking at this in a kind of a broader context. And then for about the last year, we've gotten serious about specifically looking at programming and how this site operates and how a redevelopment of this site could start to take form. The primary matter as far as the site goes is, as was presented a bit earlier, it's at the crossroads of many different things, not just visually and architecturally and use-wise, but also in terms of how you move through this part of the historic district, whether it's vehicular traffic or pedestrian traffic or just engagement in general, how it relates to the public space, the plaza that is across the street with the new library. And so we've had a lot of dialogue, probably more so than you normally would have on a early stage of a development with staff and administration and even with neighbors. We've met with the HOA board and various members of the project to the north, the condominium project. We've been working to meet with some of the other kind of longer term residents of the historic district. That some live on Indian Run, and Mr. Daft, who was involved with the task force of the historic review. We couldn't get that put together soon enough. We're actually meeting with them on Sunday, this coming Sunday. So we've gotten terrific feedback already from lots of folks. We've also read the most recent feedback that people have posted online, and we'd like to make some responses to those tonight. There's more feedback that we know is coming, and there may be some more online that we've not had a chance to see yet today. But there's a number of folks that are supportive of kind of what's trying to be accomplished here. Again, kind of a key thing is because of this site being where it is, it's at the very northern edge of the historic district, and it's kind of a finger that pokes up into other designations of district. In a conversation with Dana McDaniel, it's a site that probably wasn't highly considered in terms of the idea of total redevelopment. So in the context of the historic district itself not being contributing, really not having any structures there that frankly add to the fabric of the historic district. It's particularly with now the bridge in place and the view coming from across the bridge is, the backside of this property is really about as poor as it can get. So you're seeing surface parking and utilities and dumpsters and power lines and, a mishmash of buildings. And so we've really tried to pay attention to kind of how residents and how visitors to the historic district and the Bridge Street district would take to this property if it had a chance to redevelop. So,
Mr. McCabe, I
yes.
would like to, so we have a number, like 6 or 7 questions we need to go through, and you'll have an opportunity to comment on those. So I'd like to move into those. Okay. And a couple of comments to you. We've just rezoned a number of places within Dublin, and that was passed last month. And I think that, you know, this was very deliberately called Historic Dublin for a reason. And contrary to what you may believe, this is not the size and scale of a building that you're talking about here. What you've been through is not atypical. So I'm going to move into the questions now. I need to ask about public comments. I know we have quite a few.
We do. Would you like me to? I know they were all provided to the board ahead of time, but I was planning to read them into the record. If you would all like me to do that, I will do that.
Yes, I think they need to be part of the record.
Okay, great. Well, I will start here. And these are in no particular order, just as they are on the network. So the first is from Matt Davis. He is at 4620 Hickory Rock Drive, Powell, Ohio. This is regarding this case 20-191. And the comment is, I am the building owner of 56 North High. Continuing to make historic downtowns more vibrant, walkable, workable, and livable are critical to supporting the local economy and the future of Dublin. I support the redevelopment of 72 and 84 North High Street to continue to make historic Dublin the anchor of the city. I believe the proposed uses add to the city. The next one is from Terry George, 105 North Riverview, Unit 414, Dublin, Ohio, 43017. I am concerned that the number of proposed units will create an even worse traffic situation on High Street than there is currently, excuse me. At times, High Street is already gridlocked. Also, pedestrians and cars currently at the intersections, plus stopped and parked delivery vehicles, already are creating a dangerous situation. Adding more cars on North High Street will make the situation even more dangerous. Secondly, there are numerous opportunities for rental housing on the east side of the river. I would prefer to see housing on the west side of the river be primarily owner-occupied. Next is Robert Massey at 105 North Riverview Street, Unit 615, Dublin, Ohio, 43017. Many positive attributes to this plan, however, the negatives are many. The 68 individual living units are too small and would reduce the value of other residential units in the area. The planned density issue. The expected price point would attract a change in demographics of this community. Traffic issues would be horrific, would possibly need to widen High Street and install a traffic light at the intersection of High and North. Safety and security may become major issues with the change in demographics, and there could be a significant rise in crime in the area, presenting a safety issue near the library. Reduce the residential density with larger units and fewer people, and thereby less traffic. The next is from Kathleen Murphy, 95 North Riverview Street, Unit 411, Dublin, Ohio, 43017. Concerns that 6,000 square feet of event center and 68 apartments is too high of a density for the area. High Street Garage is already nearly full on weekends, and the Getaway, although not open yet, and we are still in a pandemic, so businesses are not at 100%. Where are the residents, visitors, and event guests going to park? I love living at Bridge Park West, but not when friends and family can't find parking. Agree those buildings need updated. Hope you keep Oscars as the restaurant. Next is Louis Slang at 105 North Riverview Street, unit number 117, Dublin, Ohio, 43017. Overall, we are okay with the concept and its design. We strenuously object to the idea of 68 650 square foot apartments, rentals. Number one, as this side of Bridge Park is nearly all comprised of ownership residents between Bridge Park West condominiums and individual neighborhood homes, we view this as a major deviation and departure of the makeup of the neighborhood. We can support a form of individual ownership of family dwellings. Number two, the proposed size of 650 square feet per dwelling for 68 units steers it to a market that leans to a younger single demographic. This most likely will result in an overburdened traffic and noise environment. In order for us to support this, the number one issue to be addressed is the size and number of family dwellings and secondarily, the occupancy model with ownership preferred over rental. The next one is from Gordon Troop at 95 North Riverview Street, Unit 514, Dublin, Ohio 43017. I support development on this piece of property, but strongly oppose this development and use for the following reasons. Small apartments attract short-term transient residents with little vested interest in the long-term viability of the community. Mixed use with condos or townhomes would be a preferred solution, allowing pride of ownership and individually committed tax base and real long-term community involvement. New scale apartments complexes attract a younger and noisier party crowd. There are plenty of these apartments on the other side of the river with retail establishments that cater to this clientele. The high street elevations, drawings, and designs with dormers are very unattractive and remind me of the wood face design you would find in an old 1970s apartment complexes or strip malls. Surely the developer can do better than that. It doesn't have to be as modern as the library across the street, but should incorporate a more modern design and materials to blend in and bridge the gap. The proposed project does not meet any of Dublin's code requirements, including the floor-story height limitations and conference facilities. More retail and restaurant space would be more preferable. 20 or 25 larger condos or townhouses would significantly reduce the large increase in traffic that will come with 65 apartments and improve pedestrian safety due to the narrow streets in this area. The next is from Trevor Vessels at 68 South Riverview Street in Dublin, Ohio 43017. I'm writing today regarding the proposed redevelopment of the existing Oscars site and surrounding buildings. I want to be clear that I am pro-development and support the applicant plans to raise the existing properties on the site. I am also certainly not against resident apartments on the site. I do have concerns that the addition of so many units results in a property, particularly a 4-story structure facing the new bridge, that doesn't fit into the surrounding area. I recognize that the developer needs to build enough residential units to make the project finally viable. However, I hope that the board will take into account the size and scope of the project and how it might fit into the historic district. I would argue that at a minimum, there should be close attention to the size of the building facing the bridge and whether it conforms to the area. I hope the board will ensure that there are enough parking spaces under the building for the residents so street and library garage parking can be used for visitors to the historic. Thank you, Trevor Vessels. And the last one is from Ross Youngs. He is, it says Unit 717, Dublin, Ohio 43017. The look of the building seems very bland, shades of gray. I'd like to see more architectural contrast. Parking is already a problem and needs to consider loss of public parking spaces. And that is all the public comment that I have at this time. If we get any additional, I'll let you know. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We move into the questions. Mr. McCabe, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
Well, I guess in the interest of time, if I could at least share you here, do that, speak to that. So if you're able to see the view, this would be kind of from the east side of the river looking back towards the development. Is that on your screens?
Yes.
Yeah. So what just in terms of the architecture and how this fits into the surroundings, Obviously there's a significant anchorage of, how the bridge lands on the west side of the river, and the existing condo project, 7-story project on the right-hand side, and then the project where the Pearl is, and the retail at the left side of the bridge landing. But what we started to pick up on is that there's a rhythm of building, break between the buildings, another building, break between the buildings, another building. So that started to set up a pattern of kind of compositionally, how should this start to look as you came across the pedestrian bridge? And then in this view, what you also have on the north side of, or south side of North Street is what's not in this picture is the new Cohatch project going up, which also has some more scale to it. So the challenge really was, how do you create a solution that encompasses the entirety of this site, respecting what happens along North Street and the adjacent properties in the historic district on that side, but then also addressing the kind of massive scale that weights down to the north side of the bridge. And so compositionally, that's kind of why this took the form it took. And then also there's a lot of interplay just from a pedestrian point of view of how you get from High Street into the courtyard, across the courtyard. We're actually looking at linkages, in meeting with staff and the Parks Department folks on how you can actually link coming off this courtyard area and get back up to the bridge and be able to get across the bridge without having to go all the way out to High Street. So, again, there's kind of the massing elements there that took their form based on these adjacent queues, while at the same time respecting that we have on High Street, making sure that we've maintained a 2.5-story face on High Street, and then also recognizing that on North Street, what we have there existing is a 3-story structure today. So kind of looking at the mass and scale, we pick up on High Street to get back to a 2.5-story building. And then really we're extending what's an existing condition in terms of height to finish out the site heading east. So, the idea that 2.5 stories is a limiting factor, makes sense when you're on the level, you're at grade, you're up on High Street and other areas that are flat within the district. But as you get to the east, again, from a massing point of view, we were wrestling with kind of the need for pulling down the height, just simply because you're really gaining height due to the fall away of the grade, not because we're going higher from a kind of ridge point of view. So that's just been the thinking all along, and how we kind of finished out the composition of this building from that southerly view. So, and if I could, just some quick responses to the input that's been received from the public, and we certainly appreciate all that. We definitely want to be collaborative. So in terms of overall redevelopment, our read and our discussions with neighbors and what this input has been, clearly there's support for redeveloping this project. So most people aren't real thrilled with what's there today and what that looks like and what it represents, and kind of a lack of highest and best use. The second part is specific to the architecture. Again, from an architectural point of view, we think we're hearing from folks that, I know there's some folks that would like to see it be more contemporary, but the constraints of the historic district really aren't going to allow that. And so we've tried to respect the guidelines of the historic district relative to architecture, particularly on North Street and High Street. So, that's the direction we're taking there. From a parking point of view, kind of another group of concerns. The kind of the loss of public parking. I think there's some confusion about the parking that's on this property today. It's certainly not public parking. It's parking that services the property as it exists now. And so what we would intend to do with the underground parking is actually replace and increase the amount of parking that exists on the site currently. And that would accommodate, for the most part, the residential piece. Working with staff and administration, the concept of using the public parking and the structured parking that exists today is consistent with other uses in the district today. So, for instance, the Pearl Restaurant isn't serviced with any parking spaces. A lot of the existing historic buildings have very limited, if any, parking spaces, and they use public spaces. And the city was very prepared to allow that to happen with this project. The issue of the apartments as a use, again, I have a lot of dialogue with staff and the administration about that. From an administration point of view, they're very supportive of the idea of having a more mix of housing stock to exist in the historic district from an activation point of view and a kind of built-in patronage perspective. We also got a lot of feedback from Dublin folks about the type of unit and the size of unit. There's been some concern about unit size in Bridge Park or Bridge Street development. Some of those larger units are not renting well, so they're not hitting a demographic that is looking to exist here. So, in the final analysis, might it be a program shift to include a few more 2-bedroom units that may be a little larger units? Sure, we can look into that. That comes down to getting a market study and understanding what's exactly right. What we did was we just started with kind of a optimum 1-story unit and filled out the space with that. So it doesn't mean we can't expand more 2-bedroom units and address that. But the kind of the feedback of no apartments in this portion of the historic district kind of runs against the grain of the idea that you really should have some equity in housing. You should be able to have, a more wider variety of folks that are able to.
I don't think there's a question about that. I think that the question has to do with the placement of them, but
Yep. Okay.
I'll move into the questions now and you'll have opportunity. But I think the board needs to have some discussion. You can hear the feedback then.
Sure.
So the first question is the board supportive of the request to demolish the existing structure fronting North Street and North Street? And as you know, because of everything we've gone through with the code and the guidelines, we do not take demolition lightly. So I will open that up for the board for discussion.
I'll start. I'm not sure I would have presented this project differently from a staff point of view, because I think 84 is really 2 buildings. There's a firewall that separates Oscars, and stylistically, Oscars is extremely different from the buildings that were added to the left. So when you look at this site, you really have four buildings, and stylistically, Oscars building is very different than the other buildings that have been added to it. And I wish consultants' reports that we've received and the other evaluations had looked specifically at each building instead of grouping things together. Because I think I can understand demolishing most of the site, but I think there are some questions about demolishing Oscars. Now I realize it changed, it's in the middle of the plan, and there are other questions about the plan that I'm sure we'll be discussing later. But when you look at that building, Oscars, it's a well-composed little building. The bays are centered in the gable. The door is centered between. Actually, the addition at the rear, whoever added the bays in the back, intentionally, you look at the roof plan, intentionally aligned them with the original bays on the front. So there's a continuity in that structure that doesn't exist in the others. And in fact, it's the same kind of compositional continuity that the proposal is incorporating in many of its pieces. It also has some details that are unique to the time that it was built. So you have, when you look closely in the bays, that's original sash in those bays. When you look at the stained glass, that's older stained glass. Now there are quirky things, and things have been changed on that because the surface material of those bays looks like it was some type of painted plywood, which would not have been in the 30s. So there are quirky things about it, but the building does reflect the history of that particular property, the history of the way that's used, and the history of the community, more so than the other three buildings that are around it. And this building has not outlived its usefulness in that. And even during these times, that restaurant is functioning during these times within that. So it just seems, I have a little trouble. I know it's in the middle of their that building, I think in other historic districts, that demolishing this would really be taboo. We may be a little bit more liberal in what we do, but it also has a scale and character of the era it was built. And if you look at that and compare it to Brazen Head, very similar to Brazen Head. So, you know, when we have applicants in past projects trying to keep a privy and reinforce a wall so that privy that has no function but is an older structure in our community would stay. I just have a little bit of heartburn with perhaps taking the Oscars out. It just, the other buildings I can understand demolishing those. You still keep that building, and you could develop this site very intensively and keep that structure. So I mean that's my only comment about the
Thank you.
I'll go next because I think Gary brought up a really good point. The 1930s section, the original section of that building, is very unique in contributing to our district. As he said, the way the additions were added, there is a firewall to the south there. You can clearly see that. So you could probably easily remove the addition on the south. The addition to the rear is only attached in one little small spot. So because of that, I think the applicant needs to meet the demolition criteria and show that they absolutely can't remove these additions to this building and reuse this building in any way. And that it is an economic hardship. Basically, they have to meet 2 of those 4 criteria. So when they come back, they would need to show that.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
Might I comment on that just real quickly? You know, all we are able to work from is what's documented within Dublin ordinance. And a very specific documentation in the ordinance is that building is not contributing. So I hear what you're saying, and we considered the same things, but when you get into the detail of the review of that building, a lot of those features of that building, like the bays on the front, for instance, are not historic. They were added subsequent. The stained glass was brought to the site. It isn't.
Okay, I'm just going to interrupt. I'm just going to tell you now. That's fine if you think all of that, but you need to have a professional write an opinion of this as part of the demolition permit and tell us why it isn't historic and why it meets the demolition criteria.
And additionally, I think Chase or Nikki, you can chime in, but I think you have to meet 2 of those criteria.
Yeah, you have to meet 2.
Not just 1.
Mr. McCabe, are you familiar with the demolition criteria?
We're very familiar. And what I'm trying to say to you is we've had this dialogue with staff, and we would not have undertaken any of the work we've done to date if there was any concern of whether a building had to remain on this property. We absolutely would not be here today.
Well, one of our things to vote on is a demolition permit. So we would need the information to support a demolition permit.
I agree with you. We understand that, but again, we've not been appraised of anything other than these are non-contributing buildings and they would be permissible to be demolished.
Have you reviewed the code and the guidelines?
For the demolition, certainly, yes.
Okay.
Well,
So,
our first question tonight is, would we approve demolition? And that's what we're answering for you tonight.
right. So, Sean?
So for me, I mean, generally redevelopment, if you think about demolition, we just talked about, I think in general, I would be supportive of redeveloping. And I have to admit, Gary's points on some of the parts for Oscars, but clearly for me, I mean, you still have to have a demolition permit, right? You have whatever we demolish, you contribute, non-contributing, the district has to have a reason to demolish it, right? You have to come with the reason to demolish it. Generically, for the rest of the site, I'm clear. I think redeveloping it to something else is an interesting thing. Not sure I agree with all the stuff that's in there, but I think it's interesting. I think to Gary's original point, if there's something about Oscars that makes it interesting to keep, I think it's the burden sits on your side that there's not a reason to keep it. But generically around it, I think redeveloping the site and getting tearing down some of the other things for that.
Okay. Thank you, Sean. Frank?
No, I don't have anything else to add. That basically Gary and Amy were covering the demo, so I'm not going to take up more time with that.
Okay, thank you. And my comments are reflective of those. Even if something is considered non-contributing, we look at a broader picture of the fabric of the neighborhood. So you would have to meet 2 of the 4 criteria for demolition to get that permit. All right, I'm going to move on to question 2. Is the board supportive of the proposed uses? So the proposal includes a combination of uses for the site, including multifamily, retail, restaurant, event center space, and open space. Code permits commercial, retail, restaurant uses in this zoning district. Multifamily residential units are permitted, but limited to upper floors. Conference and event centers are not permitted uses in this zoning district, conditionally or outright. Code amendments nearing approval would allow for this event space up to 3,000 square feet in size. The applicant requests about the proposed mix of uses for the site and the zoning amendment to permit 6,000 square feet of event. So there would be required a number of permits and waivers in this proposed use. So I will start with Gary.
Well, first of all, I do support the housing type that's being introduced. I think there is a shortage of units like are being proposed in the community. I mean, there's a national problem, and we see it too in our community, with having a variation of housing types for people of different lifestyles, different family sizes. So I have no problem with the kinds of residential units that are being proposed. Regarding the conference center, if we're asked to support a variance, because that's what would occur if it comes to us, then we'd be asked to at least say how we felt about the variance. I think we need to understand, and what is the hardship that would motivate a board to say this variance is valid for this use that the code doesn't permit. And I'm not sure yet what that is, because I know across the river we have a conference center. So and when I read the report, I didn't think the report was your presentation was making the strongest case that you had this space and you couldn't figure out how to use it, so you put the conference center down there. That's the way your report is written. You said all these other uses wouldn't work down there, but a conference center would. Office market's not good right now. Well, that's not a hardship. So we need, I think for me to support the variance, and I have supported other variances in use in the past, I would need to know what is the grounds for the variance. So.
Thank you, Gary. Amy?
Regarding the conference center, it's not allowed in code now, but we did say we would consider a small conference center in the new code. And we said like 3,000 square feet, if the conditions were right. And you're asking for double that. So I'm gonna say, no, I probably would not support that unless you had a very good cause or very good plan. But I'll tell you right now, I would not support a 6,000 square foot conference center.
Thank you. Sean?
A few things. So I agree a bit with Gary on we need more mixed use residency. I think that number feels, I first read it and it kind of shocked me a bit. It seems like too many, and having 600 square feet seems like something a bit on the small side, because the first thing I thought was how many people will be down there, traffic. Okay, now I see the parking challenge. So I don't think that mix doesn't feel right between let's say one bedroom and the other ones. Certainly, I think some mixed use residential I think is important, but some of the public comment I think is important too. That it feels like too many, the parking, the traffic, and what's the mix between rentals, people owning their property is also about kind of demographically the split between the east side and the west side of the river, and how do we make sure and how do we keep the historic side one area and the Bridge Street on the other area. Retail, and as we say on the first floor, it feels like there could be more. And restaurant felt small, and the retail space, as I recall, was 1,800 square feet, something like this. Conference center, again, I think as it gets bigger, we have another parking problem, right? I tend to agree with Amy. We think we debated 3,000 quite a bit when we were trying to think about the use, the conditional uses. And as it gets bigger and bigger, what's the purpose of that conference center? And I think as Gary said, going across the river. So from that, I'm not, trying to be too negative. I'm giving you the negative view. I'm not. I'm not at all opposed to redeveloping the spot. I think it needs some. I think it needs something there that kind of anchors the point, as you said. But for me, the first thing that struck out is the residential. It's just too many for the space and the parking and the traffic. It was my first thought when I was reading the uses.
Thank you, Sean. Frank?
Like Sean said, I don't want to be Mr. Negative, but I'll start with some of the points that hit me off at first. First off, this board, I think Gary actually summed it up very nicely, that this board does not like to give variances for zoning code, especially codes that are pretty much brand new for this area. Yeah. So you would really need to come up with strong reasons, and also my own following of code and dealing with it for 20 years, that you need a real strong reason to have a variance, not just what it sounds like is because we want to. The other concerns brought up by the citizens who live right around there, and I have to agree, is traffic. Traffic is already any night starting in the week about 4:30, you can see traffic starts to back up automatically. You add 65 units in there. If any of those units are a couple, you could be more than 65 people. So that traffic is also something that would seriously concern me. I'm not saying I would automatically vote no on any redevelopment, which I wouldn't. I think there could be redevelopment there. I just think the scope and scale right now is out of line of what the area can hold and what the people who already have a vested interest, mainly like homeowners in the area, want to see. That's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. So my comments, and I want to be clear, I am a resident in historic Dublin, so this is very personal for me. I have concerns about the conference center too big. As has been said, we just finished and had approved the second reading with City Council Monday night on maximum of 3,000 square feet for conference center. So I'm not really interested unless there's some really compelling reason in putting a permitting that. I have very strong concerns about the safety, security, and traffic, and how that those of us who live in the district by adding all of those small units. It doesn't make. We feel very comfortable right now in the historic district walking around after dark. But you add a bunch of transient individuals into the district and that high density. I have to echo my neighbors. I'm not in favor of it at all. However, I want to be clear, I am also interested in redeveloping that site. I think there's a lot of interesting things you could do. And we'll get into it later, it's the density is a problem for me. So I understand we have some more public comments. Let's go ahead and read those in.
Okay, I have one more that was received while you were discussing, and that is from Terry Flanagan at 6767 Fallen Timbers, Dublin, Ohio, 43017. I am in favor of the redevelopment of the Oscars block in historic Dublin. What about the city's need for workforce housing? Affordable housing reinforces Dublin's commitment to diversity and inclusion in the workforce and in housing. The idea that a younger workforce will contribute to noise violations is profiling of a younger demographic. Dublin decided it would be on board of redeveloping the block of North High Street many years ago. There is a tasteful way to pay homage to the past while bridging development for the future. It's that quality that sets Dublin apart. We need to be supportive of investment in our community.
So I have a question on all of the residential housing that was built on the other side of the river. What is the occupation rate of that? Do you guys have any idea?
Yeah, we do. We've actually done analytics on all the apartments within.
Okay, excuse me, Mr. McCabe. I want to hear this from staff, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so we did begin to look into this. Unfortunately, we haven't gotten a response back on occupancy yet, so I don't have that information at this time.
Okay.
Ms. Bryant,
I walk through that area and I see a lot of empty units. So I guess that's why I'm asking the question. I'm very sensitive to not making our quaint neighborhood look like something. I mean, we're shortly going to not be historic if we continue down there. So, which for all of us would mean that there would be no need for a monthly meeting, right? All right, I'm going to move on to the third question. Is the board supportive of the proposed site layout? So I'll mix it up a little bit and have Frank go first this time.
The overall layout, I don't have any real negative remarks upon the layout. I think the idea is pretty sound. The U shape, the courtyard, the coming down into it. So, I mean, just as a general overall on the layout, I don't really have anything else to say on that. I'll probably yield my time more to the architect, let them get into it more, because I'm sure there's something to be said there.
Thank you, Frank.
Sure.
Sean?
For me, again, I think from a layout standpoint, I think it's okay. I'm not sure I like from just a generic, we'll get into it more, I think, on the massing side of just how it fits on High Street. I think I do agree. I think some architectural layout there that could be more interesting in a certain sense. And also from the courtyard, I was still struggling with it. I mean, it's nice to have some open space, but the purpose is to have open space. But maybe from the architecture side, I mean, just having people in the balconies, it seemed like I don't know, just for me, if I'm sitting there and people on their balconies looking down, Okay, we have to having open space is good, and having a connector down so you don't have to walk all around the building is interesting. But that courtyard felt out of place because I was unsure what you would do in there. On the other side of the river, it sits kind of between and in the more on the throughways, so it feels different than that. And that one feels confined. You're just sitting in there having a sandwich in between everybody's house. So I'm not sure exactly how I feel on that side, but otherwise we'll come to the massing later, but on High Street, but otherwise the layout I think is the way it sits on the plot is okay.
Okay, thank you. Amy?
This is actually kind of a hard question for me to answer because to me, the next three, layout, scale, mass height, all go together. And in my opinion, you have to come back with a whole new building. It's so all the things combined. I can't support this large mass of a building, no matter how it's laid out. So
Okay, we'll get
I can't really answer that, I guess.
Yeah, the next question is the massing and scale, so we can go into that.
And I see what Amy's saying too. It's like there's a layout.
Yeah.
I think with the mass and scale is a whole different ball wax.
Yeah.
Okay. So Gary, yes,
Yeah,
please.
I would like to speak to the courtyard and the site movement because and I would say, now Oscar's, that conversation will continue, but the idea of Sean makes the great point, which is which implicit in his point is the way these courtyard apartments were typically developed is the courtyard was just for the residents. So, and it was a way you created a sense of community. It was actually your space, and you knew who lived because you'd see them in the courtyard or you'd see them across. So, if they want to include, it would not be, it would not be something I would say, oh, this is a terrible idea, I'm not supporting the project. But this courtyard really serves as a light well and an access point for that conference center. So I don't think it benefits the city at all. In fact, I think it hurts the fabric of keeping people out on the street, because one of the things I've been impressed with is the space in front of the bridge, even with COVID, when the weather's nice, how active the space is in front of the bridge. The corner, the little space that was created at the corner of High and Bridge Streets is always activated. The plaza in front of the library, it's too bad. That doesn't seem like it's gotten a lot of use yet. But to the credit of the architects, and I know there's a lot of conversation about the library, but to the credit of those architects, if you look at the plaza directs people to the corner, and which would be a logical route then, the plaza directs people to the corner that is just on the south edge of the site, which would be a logical path to then take people down to the river. And what I like about their proposal is their grading, because right now you can't really walk along there down. Their proposal lowers the grade, so you could actually create sort of a walkway, a wider walkway along there that would tie into what's already been initiated with the parking garage, with the plaza, with the diagonal movement to the corner, and then you could route people down that way. This seems a little unnatural based on where it's located in the site. And it's a different condition than the opening at Starbucks, because that's not forming behind those buildings. There's not an enclosed courtyard that's really a protected sanctum of the residents. So, I mean, I'm okay if they want to do it, but I don't think it helps us from a community wise, and may take some of the life of the street away. I also wonder about the quality of sunlight you get, because those buildings aren't that far apart. So it may be in shadow a lot.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to question 4. So this is the board supportive of the proposed scale, massing, and height of the building? If so, would the board support future waivers to the building type requirements to allow these deviations? If not, what modifications are recommended to meet the requirements? The property is located within historic Dublin and is zoned historic core, Bridge Street historic core. The zoning the zoning district, I'm sorry, permits 2 commercial building types within this district. While a full building and type analysis has not occurred, the historic mixed-use building would be the most applicable building type for the proposal, given its use, layout, and form, which is limited to 2.5 stories in height. The board should reference this building type and its requirements along with the historic district design guidelines when considering the appropriateness of this building. Okay, who would like to start?
I can go and I'll be quick. Also, our new code, the new code that's being passed, it really doesn't matter what the building type is. I mean, it's kind of irrelevant now. So ultimately, it's the 2.5 stories. And I think we can definitely not go higher than 2.5 stories on High Street. We cannot go higher than the existing building to the south. I'm willing to give a little bit more height, maybe like 3 stories at the rear, but definitely not the 5 stories that's been presented. So you somehow on this plan, you need to shave off about 2 stories.
Okay. What about scale and massing?
I think that all comes with you need to scale the whole thing down.
Okay.
It's just way too massive and big for our historic core. You got to remember, we have, people will be using the riverfront and standing along that road. It's no longer just some rear alley that occasionally will get used. We have a park down there. We're going to use it a lot. And people don't want to stand next to a 5-story tall building when they're down at the park.
Thank you, Amy.
Kathy, I'm going to jump in on that one also.
Sure, Frank.
With that, I was thinking about it. I understand and I appreciate completely keeping the ridge line going across, but it just doesn't fit in that area. And one of the reasons we have this code is to keep the scale down. Stepping down as it goes towards the river would make more sense in keeping with the scale of what we're trying to do and what the city's trying to do in the historic district, period. And with that also, I forgot one of the other variances that were requested would be parking. And I think the parking would be, the number you would need would be brought back down if you reduce the scope and scale, the mass of this building. You wouldn't need as many parking spots either, which would also help with the traffic congestion issue. Because really, when you look at the streets right there, you got 1 lane going each direction. That's it. It's not a big street. I mean, especially if you look across the river at what they put in over there, the streets are much wider, can handle more traffic, the main streets, that is. But anyway, so just to jump on tandem with what Amy was saying.
Thank you, Frank. Sean? Sean,
You're
you're
mute,
on
Sean.
mute. Okay.
Good grief. How many Zoom calls have been on? So I agree with Amy. I mean, it's just, the first thing that strikes me from the back is it's just so massive from the back. That's the first thing that catches me. And as you have the rendering that looks through the courtyard, it starts to look like the other side of the river, right? When I look back and forth, and I think we've had some comments from the city council. People say that okay, we don't want them to be the same, right? So this is something that from a massing standpoint. And then from the front, I mean, on some of the pages, you use some, you're trying to show some things on Bridge Street and South High Street, overlaying them. And from High Street, I think from the architectural side, it's kind of, I think it could use some more architectural character from the massing in the front, if we keep it at 2.5 stories, let's say. And if you look at South High Street, you overlaid that, I think, on like page 12 or something like that, where the heights of the buildings, if you look at Oscars and you had things around it that had more architectural character, or if you look right on Bridge and going south on High, just how the masses of the roof lines, and you had some flat roofs, some taller roofs. I think there could be some more interesting architectural things on the front. Again, on the North Street, it's just so massive sitting there. I think, as Frank said, I think there could be a step down to just how it fits in with the form. And we've talked a lot about how the coming south, there's kind of from Z1 and Z2, that's kind of the entrance as you going into Old Dublin. don't want the next one to look the same, right? I think there's something about the transition moving down the street. And I think if you start to look at it, it starts to feel like we're moving what we call the old Bridge Street district, Z1 and Z2. We're just moving it far south to Bridge Street. And I'm unless I misunderstand, or when we were talking to the city council, that's not what we wanted. So from a massing, I think it's, as you say, as Amy said, it's too big. It's certainly from the back for me, that just sticks out, and for me is completely a bit out of character as we're trying to move south. And then from the front, I think there's some things that be done, and I think you showed them in your renderings from what you looked at on the south, that there could be some architectural interest there. And then, as you say, from just how the courtyard fits and looks out, there could be something there to change.
Thank you, Sean. Gary?
I agree, I think, with many of the comments that have been made. I might be able to go one more story than Amy with a qualification on the north side, not in the rest of the project. I mean, and we're talking about reducing it. I'm just talking about maybe reducing it one floor on that side. I do think when you look from the rear, there's a real scale difference when you compare the portion, when you look from the rear, the portion of the structure that's to the south, that's almost treated more like a traditional building, than the structure very close to it, in very close proximity to it. So and while Chase presented Cohatch as 3 stories, it's really deceptive. I mean, those architects brought the roof line down to the top of the 2nd story. And then there's a horizontal band, the balcony or that trellis they're trying to create to divorce the 1st floor from the 2nd. So they worked really hard to create something that looks like 2 stories and even break it down beyond that. So, so what we see, what's on the south side at the rear is close. That I could accept, but the other one at the rear on the north is too tall. That mass could even step. I mean, the portion that comes out towards the park could be lower than the portion that's back. And when we talk about architectural character, I'm going to make a couple other comments that will follow in that vein.
Thank you, Gary. And my comments are very similar. I think it's way too massive. The approval for a 5-story when 2.5. I mean, we worked with Cohatch has been brought up a couple of times. We worked a lot with them to get that so that it wasn't so massive on, what looked like the alley. There are residential houses not that far from there as well on North Riverview Street that we don't want all of their sunlight being taken by the massive buildings on the other side of the street. So I echo too big, way too big. All right. And Mr. McCabe, you will have an opportunity after we go through this to comment. So number 5, are the proposed architectural character and materials compatible with surrounding development? So Gary, why don't you go ahead and start that one?
What I was reminded of is I was preparing for tonight's meeting, and our consultant put it in comments about another project that there should be no false historicism. Traditional elements should be used in the proper manner, and they should only be combined in a way that works together. And what you have here, and it's very different than the Z2 building, is you have a flat roof building, essentially. Everything that's facing that courtyard is a flat roof building. And then we have applied to that on the outside, there's this skin and roof slope of a traditional building. Well, if you look at Z2, now Z2 is a pretty big building, but Z2, that entire building is under, with one exception, and they carved out a place for the mechanicals. But the primary volumes of Z2 are all in a traditional roof form. If you look at the buildings where Starbucks is located, all a traditional some variation of a gabled roof. It is not gable and then a flat roof that's extending back. And the front part is really just camouflage for what's going on behind. So I think that it does not meet our code of building. Now, that doesn't mean you couldn't make the whole thing with flat roofs. There are some traditional buildings, actually traditional commercial buildings had flat roofs. So, but I don't think the way the history is applied to this is appropriate and is consistent with our guidelines. If there was not an issue, if one strategy that I would see, if Oscars was not an issue, would be an L-shaped building that was lower scale, that faced High Street, turned the corner, and came down the side street. And then back a separate building pushed against the north property line that was taller, that had its own character. They were tied together maybe with materials, but it didn't try to imitate. So I think there are ways it could be handled that would be more appropriate with our guidelines. But I have a real problem with the way we've just kind of applied this slope roof to these essentially flat roof buildings.
Thank you, Gary. Sean?
For that, I agree with Gary. When I talked about the back, you should have that flat roof, and then you have a gable roof next to it. They working together feels somehow for me a bit out of place. We talk about the massing. One looks quite modern. It looks like then we try to put a traditional building beside it. So I kind of agree. Maybe you can find maybe a different way to arrange them. Maybe more historically appropriate, but it looks a bit strange. You have a more modern versus the one sitting next to it that we built.
Thank you, Sean. Frank?
No, I don't have anything else to add. It was all covered.
Okay, thank you. Amy?
Nothing additional. I think they just need to rework it all and come back.
I have no additional comments on that as well. So the last question, last question is the board supportive of the conceptual open spaces and proposed public access to the central courtyard? The applicant requests feedback with regard to the design of the proposed open spaces and the public access to them. So I think some of this was covered. Gary, go ahead and start us on this.
Well, I don't have much. Really, when we talked about the courtyard and talked about linking with the pedestrian paths that have been already created, I think I covered that.
Okay. All right. Amy?
Again, I think they just need to figure out a different way to put this. Now, I will say that whatever the final layout is or design, we should take advantage and make sure we have easy access down to the park that's going to be there. And obviously back up to High Street.
Okay, thank you. Frank?
I like what Gary said, how, traditionally it was like a light well and a community area for the building itself. But I'm also kind of like the idea of having a public access or a thoroughfare to get from High Street down. So really, I'm not really against, the idea, the concept, as it were.
Okay, thank you. Sean?
I don't think I said mine on the public access, but and I think the actually front, I think there's some good open area in the front where people can gather. Gary said, like on the corners. I think there's some of that that's quite nice. So.
Okay, thank you. All right. Then are there from the board members, is there anything else that you'd like to add or ask questions about, consider? Okay. Okay, Mr. McCabe, do you understand the feedback you've been given?
I do. A couple of quick clarifications, if you don't mind. The event center just to be clear, that certainly wasn't an afterthought. From very early on, we looked at this and said, this is a great location. You've got a view of the river, a view of the bridge, a really interesting environment that people like. And, as you pointed out, gathering at the headway of the bridge is something that's going to become more a commonplace thing for folks to do that visit the area. So the idea of having a place where you can look out over the river and be indoors and outdoors at the same time, that was an appeal from very early on. And again, we talked to staff about that and administration about that, and the idea of having a event center on the west side was equally shared. Just a point to consider, and we do understand that the 3,000 square foot is being proposed for the new overlay guidelines. The dilemma is that in the marketplace, for someone to actually operate a business that is an event center, they can't find a model where a 3,000 square foot space can actually work as a business proposition. Kind of limits you on the types of events you could hold there. There's also, I guess, some question about the nature of an event center, whether at 3,000 square feet, if that's to include kitchen facilities and all those types of things, you've got a fixed cost that you've got to cover. And to try and do all of that within a 3,000 square foot footprint is just something you're not going to commonly find in the marketplace, because it's just not a business model that makes sense. So that was the driving factor there. So if it's a 3,000 square foot, that's just how it's going to be, then there won't be an event center at this location.
Well, and I think that would be appropriate. I mean, there are other places on the other side of the river that have the space for that size of an event center.
And to be clear, when we picked 3,000, we did it purposely to limit the types of activities that could be there. We wanted something very small. So
I
that was
understand.
intentional.
Yeah, I understand that, but we're not in the business of running event centers. We would lease that to someone who did. And in the marketplace, we don't find anybody that has any inclination to run a 3,000 square foot center. So that would come off the table. I guess the other kind of a bit of deflation, I guess, we're dealing with tonight. If a 2.5 story and frankly even a 3-story limitation is going to be applied across this property, you won't be seeing us again. There's just no practical way to advance a project here with those constraints. We can't. There's no way to afford to hide the parking. To tear down these buildings and put back a building that is basically the same square footage as what's on High Street, to tear down a 3-story building and replace it with a 2.5-story building on North Street is really just something that doesn't make any sense. So if truly the objective is to stick with those as limiting factors, then the property as it exists out there today is property that's going to exist. There's just nowhere to go with that. So that, I guess, is the unfortunate thing, that there's what's really quite a mishmash of buildings sitting on that property today is probably going to stay that way for a very long time. And that's we just don't know how to think about it tonight, because we have spent 2 years thinking about this and many other, and looked at lots of alternatives. And in the end, again, you've got to deal with the circumstance of either, again, leveling the buildings that are now and just putting back new buildings for the sake of having new buildings, but none of the other conditions in terms of, it's kind of the only big parking area that's got high visibility from the streets. And now you talk about the new park that's going to be along the riverside. Again, think about what you're going to look at. So looking at the back of that building as it exists today is not a great thing. And so there's really not going to be a remedy for that other than finding some kind of a plan that provides enough useful purpose and enough revenue stream to actually afford to put in new structures there. And particularly the fact that to put parking on this property that actually accommodates any uses that need to be on this property, and do it in a way that drops them below grade, through the rock of Dublin that has to be blasted out and put that into place is an extraordinary expense, and you have to be able to pay for that. So, so we hear you, appreciate the feedback, appreciate the comments. We certainly have looked forward to be collaborative on a go-forward basis, but we're going to have to do a lot of regrouping after tonight. And again, if truly, from a massing and scale point of view, I mean, regardless of unit counts and square footages and everything else, if we're just looking at the constraint of this is a 2.5-story site, again, you won't see us again. There's nothing we can do to come back and talk to you again about redeveloping this property.
We understand that. We understand that. Apparently, we have another public comment to read into the record.
We do. It is from Matt Ratliff at 5964 Terra Hill, Dublin, Ohio, 43017. This project is good for Dublin and good for our residents. In a pandemic, we continue to see investment in our historic core. If you want historic Dublin to continue to compete or even contribute to downtown Dublin, you have to give this project a chance. A variety of housing needs exist in Dublin. This board needs to put their personal agendas to the side as it relates to apartment and younger residents, and as it relates to their attitudes towards new development. Dublin needs investment, and especially during a pandemic. The personality of North High is different than South High, and that's okay, and some could argue by design. Thanks.
Well, thank you. All right.
Kathy, could I add a comment?
Sure, Gary.
I just wanted to, first of all, I think the presentation that Mr. McCabe and his team put together was extremely thorough. He can, and just remind him, he can come back with simple massing studies. And so you do not, if you have other thoughts or ideas, you could come back with more to scale sketch concepts. If you wanted to continue to explore ways of developing the parcel without doing the full detailed presentation, at some point you would need to, but you don't need to come back to us if you want to continue a dialogue and explore other options.
That's a very good point. Thank you, Gary.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, and that's where the collaboration comes in. You did do a very thorough job, but there would be so many variances that would need to be put in place in it. I think that would be a difficult hill to climb.
We hear you.
All right. Thank you.
Appreciate your time very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So our next item on the agenda is 181 South High Street. This is another informal review. This application is a request for informal review and feedback for the demolition of an existing structure and construction of a new single-family residence on a 0.747 acre site zoned Bridge Street District Historic Residential. The site is northwest of the intersection of South High with Waterford Drive, and Ms. Martin will be our presenter.
Good evening. Just give me one moment. Okay, as mentioned, this is a request for informal review and feedback on a new proposal for 181 South High Street. This site is located northwest of the intersection of Waterford Drive with South Street and is the southernmost parcel in the 1818 historic Dublin plot. As mentioned, the site is 0.47 acres in size and contains an existing single-family residence. The vehicular access is provided via Waterford Drive, and public sidewalks extend along Waterford Drive as well as South High Street. There are a number of mature trees located on the west side of the parcel, adjacent to existing single-family residential within the Waterford Planned Unit Development District. A bit of surrounding context, the property immediately to the south of this site is the Carr Barn. This site is presently preserved and is city-owned land. Immediately to the north is the Carr House, which is still within the Carr family ownership and is the companion to the barn. Immediately across the street, there are two homes that are new construction within historic Dublin, 182 South High Street and 190 South High Street. You'll see here the character of these homes varies, although they are simple and vernacular in character. This is the existing home. It is a two-story brick home. You can see here along South High Street, there is an existing historic stone wall that runs the length of the property, as well as on the right-hand side of your screen, the Waterford Drive access point, as well as you'll note on the right-hand or the left-hand side of the right-hand picture, the red shed / detached garage that is proposed to be retained with this project. And I will provide more detail on that forthcoming. So to take a step back, a bit of history, the Architecture Review Board may recall that this project was before you in October of 2020. However, it was before you in a significantly different fashion. In October 2020, the applicant was proposing to retain the existing two-story brick residence and modify the exterior significantly, including demolition of the attached garage. The modifications were proposed to be made in a farmhouse character, consistent with current development trends in single-family residential. At that time, the board provided feedback and was particularly concerned regarding the farmhouse character, as well as the form of the existing structure, particularly with the application of the farmhouse character to it. At the time, the board discussed a number of potential alternatives, including pursuing a different architectural style more consistent with the form of the existing structure, or potentially considering redevelopment of the site altogether. The proposal before you this evening is in response to that informal review and is for demolition and redevelopment of this single family site. So this building was built in 1967 and as mentioned, is constructed of brick. The historic and cultural assessment completed by the city in 2017 designates this building as non-contributing. At the time that the properties were assessed in 2016, this property was 49 years old and therefore was not considered in great detail, as properties must be at least 50 years old to be evaluated. As previously mentioned, there is a historic stone wall that runs the length of this property. With the proposed site plan, partial demolition of this wall would be required, and the board is asked to consider that this evening.
Thank you.
Proposed site plan.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. The proposed site plan is shown on your screen. The home is proposed to be centrally located on the site. You'll notice here that the access point along Waterford Drive shifts to the west of the parcel. The existing shed and garage along Waterford Drive that is detached is retained and is accessed in a rear-loaded manner, as well as the proposed two-car attached garage. And you can see here the walkway that intersects the South High Street sidewalk and historic stone wall. So the applicant is looking for input on these conceptual elevations. 3 of the 4 elevations have been provided. These are the three most visible elevations. The proposed character, according to the applicant, is a simple vernacular cottage. Staff has identified this as having farmhouse characteristics, including a popular farmhouse color palette. The home has a steeply pitched roof, which will be sheathed in asphalt shingles with a low pitch standing seam metal roof, closely mimicking 190 South High Street. The wraparound porch is also a feature, as well as a double entry. There is a prominent dormer located on the front facade of the home. And then you will notice along the South High Street, or the east elevation, you can see a portion of the attached two-car garage. That garage will be set back a significant amount from the front facade of the home. So the staff does not anticipate that it would present as shown in this elevation. On the right-hand side of your screen is the rear elevation. This provides access to the outdoor living space, as well as that rear-loaded garage. The next elevation, it's important to keep in mind that this elevation shows the proposed new construction. However, it does not show the context of the existing shed, which would alter the character from Waterford Drive and really mask a large portion of the proposed attached garage. So you can see here again, those steeply pitched roofs, the incorporation of stone veneer on both the front facade of the home as well as the chimney. And with that, staff has recommended a number of discussion questions this evening. And then, of course, any other considerations that the board may have. And with that, I will turn it over to the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the applicant have any comments or presentation? Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Believe it or not, I do Zoom calls all day long. I can't believe I blew that.
It doesn't seem to matter.
At any rate, my name's Tim Burble. I didn't get to meet all of you in the last meeting. Debbie handled it, so I was unavailable. So thanks for spending your evening with us on this tonight. I just wanted to make a couple of comments, and then I'll hand it over to Rich to go into detail. But you know, when we look at this project, we've always believed this is a really great opportunity to make this important corner very beautiful and work to make it complement the neighborhood more effectively. And as you all know, it's a very visible corner. It's the entrance to Waterford Village. It's adjacent to the park and the historic barn. And in some ways, it's almost an entrance from South High as you head into the downtown commercial district. So today, the other houses around it have a lot of character. And we feel that today that this house really detracts from all that. So, you know, it was built many years after the majority of the homes that are along that stretch of High Street. So we don't feel it fits the character of those homes, or even the ones that were built more recently. So to be blunt, you know, today the house, and as a result, the corner, it's just not very pretty to look at. So what we tried to do is figure out a way to renovate and do it in a way that would give it a lot of character and make it blend and fit in and be something we'd be proud of. But it just got more and more expensive, and the design elements didn't come together. And in the first review, we were kind of happy to hear all of you say, you know, geez, you're going to spend so much money, maybe you should just start over again. So that's what we did. And so what Rich will do is he's going to take you through the new direction tonight, and that is to completely rebuild it. And we think make something really special and really contribute to the neighborhood. So with that, Rich, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Am I unmuted?
You're good.
All right. That's the second time tonight someone was muted. Thanks again for allowing us another informal review. This is becoming a habit. Maybe I should apologize for that.
No,
as
we think they're great. We really like to do this. So.
All right, I take that back. Nikki mentioned already that we were here in October. I won't repeat that. As Tim said, we've taken another look at the project and we've decided to explore, replacing the home instead of drastically changing it. And that decision was partly based upon the economics of the project, as Tim talked about. We could spend a ton of money. In fact, we were going to spend a ton of money on that house and still have low ceilings, a somewhat awkward floor plan, more bedrooms than they need, and an exterior that didn't live up to the character of the surrounding area. But we were also encouraged by comments from some of the ARB members who suggest that it isn't really a contributing structure, regardless of its age, that the changes that we had proposed didn't go far enough, and that replacing the home might be a viable option. As you read in the architectural or the applicant statement that we put together, the proposed home is a 1.5-story gabled vernacular cottage with a wraparound front porch and connected to a barn-like structure that contains a garage with a home office above. I want to point out as you look at the drawings, and I assume you have the little 3D sketches too, that this is kind of what you see is what you get right now. The thought that's gone into this in terms of materials and everything else is right there on paper. So, the consultant brought up a lot of questions about materials, and I don't have any answers to those any more than what you see at this point. But we're assuming and proposing that we'll probably be using asphalt shingles, a little bit of standing seam metal on the roof, probably painted clapboard siding and trim, and some areas of cultured stone veneer. The windows will be wood clad with simulated divided lights. The placement of the house on the lot is similar to the location of the existing home. We're going to keep the large existing trees to the east, as well as the stone street wall along South High Street. We're going to extend a new sidewalk from the house through that wall down to the brick walk on High Street. In this version of the project, we've moved the driveway to the back of the property so that the garage doors face west away from the public streets. The garage structure that we're building, it's attached, has a third garage door placed on the south side of the garage, which we think gives that facade a little more interest. And it also gives Tim and Debbie the potential to use that part of the garage as part of the entertaining space in the backyard when they open that up. The new house is located entirely within the existing setbacks and should require no variances to building lines. I won't go through the numbers. I think those are in your packet there. Lastly, just have a couple of comments regarding the consultant's report and the planning report. The farmhouse style that Nikki mentioned and that was also brought up in the planning or the consultant's report, that didn't come from us. We're just intending this to be a simple vernacular cottage. There are numerous examples of walks and driveways that extend through the stone street wall as we're proposing, and we think that's appropriate in this regard. The positioning of the house will not require the removal of any trees at the west end of the property. We're keeping the shed in part because it works as part of the overall composition and massing. We're going to renovate it. The doors that open to allow a car inside will be on the back of the building instead of where they are now. And then, of course, we're going to paint and repair and roof the house or the shed to match the house. Landscaping obviously will be addressed at a later date. Exterior materials, as I said, are conceptual. And lastly, there was a couple of comments about the roof height in the consultant's report. I just want to point out, I know all of you understand that elevation views of buildings with slope roofs always exaggerate the vertical aspect of the roof in relationship to the walls. I think the relationship's correct. And to kind of make sure that that's clear, that's why I've included the 3D images so that you get a more realistic view of the roof in relationship to the walls and the dormer and everything else. And that's what I've got. Again, we're excited to participate in this district again and look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Thank you, Rich. Okay. Are there any public comments?
We have no public comments at this time.
Okay. All right, so we'll go into the questions for the board to discuss. And then there'll be an opportunity at the end of that for the applicants to have any clarifying questions. So the first question is, does the board support demolition of the existing home and a portion of the historic stone wall?
Hey, Kathy,
Yes.
I'd like to start with that. On the demolition of the historic stone wall, maybe representatives of the city can help me with that. What, besides us, what would be the permit requirements for that? Just out of curiosity, I guess Nikki could probably answer that one.
Yeah, so in addition to being approved for demolition as part of this board, that would need to be shown as part of this building permit. The applicant could either do a site-only permit to modify that specific portion, or they could include it with the entire building permit. Staff would ask for an additional, pardon me, staff would ask for an additional level of information to ensure the structural integrity of that wall as it's modified.
Which that actually kind of got into my question. I, in general, would say no to touching, harming the walls at all, but I think this would be one of the situations where we could look at it and say it could benefit the whole aspect of the house coming to the street, showing that the front of the house does front High Street and having that walkway. Otherwise, that was my big question about the wall that I had.
Thank you, Frank.
Sure.
Amy?
Yeah, so as far as demolition of the house, I totally agree that it's fine. I think you meet criteria 1, that there's no architectural historic significance. I'm sure you could show criteria 2 about your economics. And honestly, I think criteria 4 counts, because I do think what you're building is going to look better than what's there now and improve the district. So you got that there. For the demolition of the stone wall, my initial instinct is or no, but I would consider it. There's a few things. One, and it might not be possible with code, because your sidewalk might have to meet code and be pretty wide. Like, I would want the narrowest gap possible. I'd also need to know how you're going to finish the ends, and it would need to be a historic stonemason. They would have to finish the ends with the types of pillars that we have elsewhere along the street. So I need a lot of details about it, but my gut instinct is no, just don't mess with the wall.
Thank you.
But that's about it.
Okay.
Amy, I think part of that, if I heard Nikki correctly, they would have to have some of that drawn up with the application for the permit, if I'm correct, Nikki. Showing what the ends would be like and so on, and the structural integrity of the wall too, to make sure we don't collapse the entire wall. But do we have a rough estimate of how wide that opening would be in the wall?
I can address that, and I'll just say what Amy said: the narrowest possible opening we can make. I would say if it got any wider than 30 inches, I'd be shocked.
Well, I didn't know if there's a code requirement that sidewalks have to be 30 inches or something, or
there isn't on private property. It's not a sidewalk. It's just
okay. So yeah, so the narrowest
enough for a person to scoot down the steps is all we're looking for. And yes, Amy, we would agree to absolutely trim the ends properly.
Are there any ADA requirements in terms of the opening?
No, because there are other ways to access the site.
Okay, thank you. Who's next?
I can go. I'm on mute, just to make sure. But from the wall standpoint, again, it's like you say, I mean, certainly trying to avoid going through the wall is always the first, because you start to take it apart, you never see what it is. And today, somehow, the house faces High Street, and we're able to overcome. But certainly coming back with what it would look like, maybe it could be open. I have to admit, I'm less open to doing that. Demolishing the house, I think we talked about it last time. You guys really went quick to that spot, but I think, as Amy said, come back with the reasons for demo. But I think it certainly is. I don't think it's a far stretch to say that it would be possible and permitted inside the code.
Thank you, Gary.
I had a feeling when you got more cost information, you'd come back with this. So, and and for all the reasons I brought up about Oscars, I would use those same reasons to say I think this demolition is warranted. So, it's not, the existing building is not a particularly well composed structure. There are no details of significance within this building that should be retained. Um, the scale, it is not consistent with the scale and character of the historic district. So, and I think to make this building, this house, up to standards people expect in where structures like this are heading in the marketplace, I think the modifications would be so great. You're going to have to change the house so dramatically that I think this is the right approach. So I definitely support what's being proposed. I do like the walk going to the street because I think anytime we connect the front of a house to the street, it helps animate the streetscape, and it gives more opportunity for direct connections and linkages between the residents, the front porch, and what's going on in the street. So,
Thank you. I echo. I actually would be kind of glad to see the house demolished and something newer and prettier in its place. I struggle, like the others have, with the stone wall. We kind of consider the remaining stone walls sacred, but you know, I think that I also like the opportunity to have the front on High Street. So I think you know that you'll have to bring a lot of information forward and details on those stone walls, and but I think that we're in favor of demolition. Okay. Number 2, does the board support the proposed site layout? If you remember in the guidelines, new buildings in the district should be designed to fit into this strong existing context. So the board is asked to provide feedback with regards to the site layout, including home, garage, patio, and driveway locations. Amy?
In general, yeah, I support the layout. I think it's fine. I'm assuming is the driveway that when you're moving the driveway, you probably don't have any room left anymore to the west of the driveway. Are you moving it as far west as possible? Because my thought was it would be really nice if you just moved the shed to the other side of the driveway and separated it further from the house, but you might not have enough room left on your property.
We don't have enough room to move the shed, but the driveway could go further west. But the shed is kind of in a fortuitous spot for us because, as Nikki mentioned in her presentation, it does help to screen that backyard. And combining that with some judicious landscaping, I think we can give them some privacy in that backyard, even though they're on a very busy corner with a park directly across the street. So we'd like to keep it where it is if we could.
Yeah, it's fine. My only thought with the shed was too, I didn't know if you're rotating or moving it because the entrance to the shed is on the east and now your driveway is going to be on the west.
Yeah, well, the very non-construction thought out solution is we're going to take the doors from this side and put them on that side.
Okay, so you'll come back.
It's not that easy, but that's our concept.
You will have revisions to the shed as part of the next phase then, most likely.
Correct.
Okay, swapping that. All right, that was my only question about the layout was regarding the shed.
Thank you. Gary?
yeah, I like the shed in its current location, and I'm glad it's going to be clad in surface because it has the potential to become a focal point from that from that direction because it does block much of the house, but it also helps to create kind of a courtyard at the back of the house, and it's consistent with our attempts. We've attempted to get detached garages on sites, so it's to reflect the original character of independent outbuildings, and I think this does that. And I also think this connection between the house and the garage is one of the better connections in terms of giving you the sense that there is some separation between the volume of the garage and the volume of the house. So I think it's well done.
Thank you.
Sean?
I think it fits nicely, looks good. I don't have another comment about that.
Okay, Frank?
Yeah, I like the layout. I like the fact that you can actually take the shed, which was not something that added to the current property, and make it a lot nicer looking and make it add to the property, the characteristics of the property. To piggyback on what Amy said also, the driveway, it looks like you almost would want to move it a little bit west, just because it might give you more room if that was feasible with your property line. I don't have the auditor in front of me, so I can't tell what the property line is offhand, but it's here or there. It's not going to make or break my view. It was just something I was looking at. And when she said, I was like, yeah, you could actually, if you wanted to, shift it to give yourself different room down there. But that's a here or there for me.
Okay, thank you. I echo comments. I think it looks very nice. Yeah. All right, number 3. And I think there was a difference of opinion in the way that this is being labeled, but does the board support the conceptual farmhouse character, including materials and architectural details? I see you smiling there.
You can call it whatever you want. I just wanted you to know that I'm not calling it that.
We understand, yes. So we are asked as the board to provide feedback with regard to the conceptual architectural character. The proposed home incorporates farmhouse characteristics, including forms, material, and finishes. The style may contribute to a false historicism, as a historic farmhouse is located at 167 South High Street, and then there's the historic Cara Barn located directly to the south. So in terms of code, all building structures and sites shall be recognized as products of their own time. Alterations that have no historic basis and which seek to create an earlier appearance inconsistent or inappropriate to the original history of the building shall be discouraged. So with that in mind, who would like to start the discussion?
I'll start before Gary goes off into the architectural world with it. I read that too, and I don't think it does misappropriate historical, fake history, making Main Street and Walt Disney World or something. I think you can look at it and see that this is a modern new build house. Just it's taking the character of the neighborhood into account when it's designed. So yeah, the only idea of a farmhouse I get maybe the front porch is sort of a farmhouse-ish. But really, I don't think it tries to misappropriate historicalness in it.
Okay.
So that was my concern. I'll let it go from there.
Thanks, Frank.
I'll go next because I totally agree with Frank. I don't think it looks like a farmhouse at all. I think it's kind of a little more of a urban bungalow, if anything, than a farmhouse. But no, and yeah, no problem at all. I don't think it's creating some fake history. I'm totally fine with it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm the same. It doesn't look like a farm. I think it looks like a cottage to me. So, but
Okay.
the houses around it, I don't see how you would mistake this for something, misappropriating something else. So, from a code standpoint, I don't see any conflict there.
Thank you. Gary?
Well, I'm not going to go too far on this, Frank, so don't worry. But the roof, the proportions of roof to wall are so different than a traditional farmhouse that this to me does not look. Maybe the end elevation of the garage as it faces front is the closest you get to something that looks like but I don't see this as a farmhouse derived. And I like the simplicity of the composition of it. The consultant's comment, the one comment I thought she made, which she may be trying to anticipate something when she said just avoid maybe the stone just as a surface across the front, so it doesn't look like the way some of our suburban homes just. And I think our code in some areas doesn't. Maybe not in a historic district, which in some parts of Dublin you can't do that. where it's just, so I'm sure you're going to take stone around a little bit more, so it just doesn't look like this applied fake surface. But I would not put it, she mentioned putting it on the dormer. I mean, that's just structurally, it's never done, and it's not done for a good structural reason. So you know, I think it's generally well done. I hope, the one thing I will say is sometimes I've been surprised when things come back and there are like 5 different materials. and it's, I love the simplicity that the drawings suggest, and I hope it retains that kind of simplicity.
Yeah, that's actually a great point, Gary, the simplicity of it. I think that is very appealing to the eye when you look at this building. It's just very straightforward. You know, it's not trying to fake anything. And it is both a cottage and a bit of a bungalow kind of going on. It just is its own building in itself, which is nice. But yeah, a stone dormer, I forgot that part was in there. I don't know how you would even support such a beast.
I think it's a great, I think it'll be a great addition to the neighborhood. So I'm very supportive of what you've got here. So the last question we have is, does the board support the proposed conceptual composition of the home, including mass and scale?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we all just actually really all just kind of jumped through that and covered that as well. That I think in general, this is a good modern addition to the neighborhood that, you know, takes all the characters and parts that we like and try to bring to fruition into the area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no comment. I think it's fine.
Gary?
I think it's well done, and I have no other additional comments. So.
Okay, Sean?
Nope, no, I mean, none for me. I think everything's been said. I'm good.
Okay, great. So it appears that we like what you've got here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Yeah,
So
that's great news. Thanks all. Yeah.
do you have any, do you need any clarification on anything that was stated?
I think so. I think we're good. You good? Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
What's
Good
next?
Thank you all very much.
All right. Have a good evening. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. Bye-bye. We good to hang up, Nikki?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, at least somebody's happy tonight. So the next item is a new case. This is Pearl Patio Canopy at 88 North High Street. This is a minor project review. This application is a request for the installation of a louvered canopy structure over an existing restaurant patio space in the Bridge Park West development, building Z2, on a 0.34 acre site zoned Bridge Street District Historic Transitional Neighborhood. The site is east of North High Street, 100 feet southeast of the intersection with Rock Crest Parkway, and Mr. Rayburn will be our presenter.
Thank you, and good evening, members of the board. As mentioned, the site is located east of North High Street, approximately 400 feet north of the intersection with North Street. The site is adjacent to the West Plaza and is in close proximity to the Scioto River and the future Riverside Crossing Park. The tenant space is located in Building Z2 within the Bridge Park West development and has frontage along North High Street to the west. Building Z2 is a non-historic structure designed to complement the vernacular style of architecture found throughout the historic Dublin district through the use of materials, colors, and window details that comply with historic color and material palettes as identified in the historic Dublin design guidelines. On this slide, you'll see the east elevation, which is a good shot from the bridge. And then you'll see the north elevation overlooking the patio. The applicant is requesting review and approval of a minor project review for exterior modifications to the patio space located on the east side of Building Z2, and that is within the area of work outlined in red on the screen. Modifications include the installation of a louvered canopy structure over an existing patio, as well as associated furniture and fixture details. The existing portion of the east elevation is proposed to be updated with the addition of a patio canopy. The proposed patio canopy is louvered system as mentioned, and plans show the canopy at 11 feet in height as measured from the established grade of the patio to the top of the structure. The bottom of the trellis is shown to align with the storefront transom framing on Z2 building. And here is what the addition looks like, or here's the existing from south elevation and the proposed south elevation. And then here's also from the north elevations with the existing and the proposed on the right. The existing storefront features a bronze finish. The frame and louvers of the patio canopy are proposed as pre-finished aluminum in a bronze color to complement the existing materials. The applicant is also proposing to include 3 outdoor ceiling fans on the bottom side of the canopy. The ceiling fans are finished in an oil rubbed bronze color. The existing patio space was originally programmed to serve as an outdoor lounge space, with casual seating around fire pits. With this application, the applicant is proposing to convert the outdoor lounge space into more of a typical outdoor dining configuration, with the optical louvered canopy providing protection from the natural elements. The renderings here include the old configuration, so that's important to note. The new outdoor configuration consists of 8 square tabletops and 1 tabletop for the existing fire table, with seating to accommodate a total of 32 patrons. Here are some details on the furnishings and other details as proposed in the application. The tabletops will have a plywood core with an exterior white cashmere granite finish. The table bases are cast iron with a black finish and a zinc coating. The patio dining chairs have a bronze antique finish. And you also see how the outdoor fans are proposed with the oil rubbed bronze finish. The applicant is also proposing outdoor heaters, but has not provided unit specifications. The applicant should work with staff to provide those details prior to applying for building permits. The applicant is proposing lighting as well with this application to complement the patio and canopy in the patio canopy. However, as proposed, the lighting does exceed what is permitted per code. Given the significant public investment in the pedestrian bridge and other public spaces nearby, staff is concerned that the lighting as proposed will negatively compete with those with that infrastructure. So staff is recommending that the applicant continue to work with us to provide lighting at more appropriate levels across the entire patio. When compared to the Architecture Review Board standards, all of the applicable criteria is met. And as well as when looking at alterations to buildings and structures in the site, all the criteria is met with condition. In total, we are recommending approval with 2 conditions, and that goes back to the specifications with outdoor heating units, as well as we're working with staff on the intensity of the lighting that's proposed outside. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is also here. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the applicant have any remarks?
Hi there, I'm Carter
Hi.
Bean, architect for Cameron Mitchell on this particular project. And I think I'd like to first thank the board for the comments made on the first case tonight, because that would have been immediately adjacent and to the south of this outdoor space, and from midday on would have cast a shadow on our patio throughout most of the year. So we're happy to hear those comments about reducing the height of that adjacent structure. You know, you're probably wondering why we're headed in this direction and making this proposal, and it really comes down to the fact that the lounge configuration really isn't conducive to this particular restaurant. And so the desire to have more outdoor dining space is there. However, to add outdoor dining without some sort of covering becomes very precarious, particularly at a restaurant where you have patrons spending quite a bit of money on a nice meal. You certainly don't want them getting caught in a storm. So, we have beautiful riverfront property here, great views. And when faced with the puzzle of how do we provide covering for our customers, get the outdoor dining space we like, and not diminish the views from inside to out, and also maintain as much of an outdoor setting as we possibly can on this terrace, this particular system came to mind, and it's purposefully slender, and the louvers that are in the roof would be open as much as we possibly can have them open, and close when we're surprised by inclement weather. So we think it's a really great solution, and we hope you agree with that. As far as the two items in staff's review, we totally agree. I didn't provide enough information on these heaters, and we happily will work with staff to come up with the right solution. We want it to be as unobtrusive as you all do. We're very careful about how these outdoor dining spaces or dining spaces in general are planned, and we want the right solution as well. So we'll continue to develop details and work with staff towards approval on that. The photometrics, this is dining space, and this is a restaurant that operates mostly in the evenings, and we don't want high light levels either. The photometric plan that was submitted shows the maximum output of the fixtures being proposed, and certainly we are going to have those on dimmers and at acceptable dining light levels to create mood. I would say that the only times that we would crank those up are for very short periods of cleaning. So I don't know how to technically address that other than to say that we'll have those on dimmers if there's a light meter test that we can do to establish that dimmed level to meet that 9.7 figure that's in the code, or below. Will most often be below. Maybe we can provide a test in that manner and prove that we're going to have those light levels. But at times of cleaning, we want to turn those lights up temporarily. So with that, I'd love to open it up to the board for questions and comments.
Okay. Thank you very much. Does the board have any questions for the applicant?
I actually have a question for staff. Is there is there a height limit to patio roofs, or like where the roof is? Does code set a limit or anything?
Nikki, I don't know, if I can't recall one right now. I would have to say we looked at comparable patios and structures and made sure that it was more or less in line with what those were proposed as.
Okay. I have a comment for later that kind of concerns the height, and I just didn't know if there was some code requirement. So
yeah, and Amy, to answer your question in short, it's no. Okay. If it was detached from the building, there would be a maximum height, but since it's attached, we would just consider it an architectural feature, and you all would have discretion to review and approve as you see fit. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any public? Oh, I'm sorry.
Let's just ask Nikki one other question. I absolutely see what staff is saying with what they call a photometric plan, the lighting, the looms coming off there. I don't know how your code is. Like, wouldn't want us to override staff's opinions on the lights, but I don't know if they could put lights in with, say, governors of some sort that says they can't go brighter or anything. Like, it's one of those things like I couldn't see how you could allow it and say, well, good luck, don't do it. It'd be one of those things you have to have it yes or no. I could see the government bureaucracy of that one stopping you. So I don't know if there's how you guys address that. Otherwise, I would lean with whatever staff said for the lighting. I don't know. That's it, Nikki. I don't know how your guys handle that kind of question.
Yeah, so the condition is intended to allow city staff and the applicant to collaborate together to figure out how to come to a resolution that meets code, and whether that is, some sort of governor or an alternate light bulb or a number of bulbs, or modifying the distribution of those light fixtures within the canopy. I think those are all things that we could explore. But as proposed, the light levels not only exceeded code, but they were quite far in excess.
Oh yeah, and it's also like the manager today of the restaurant who might be completely on board with this. He leaves in 5 years or something, and somebody else takes over, and they want to do something completely different with the lighting. What would be the method of enforcement that the city would even have in such an effect? That was my kind of question also.
Yeah. And so in terms of enforcement, most of our enforcement is, reactive and not proactive. Granted, this is a very visible location, so I would assume it would be brought to the city's attention rather quickly. We do have light meters that our zoning enforcement officers have access to, and could verify that way. The next step would be a letter. Usually tenants, as well as the building owner, have been very collaborative. So I would assume it would be addressed in short order.
Okay.
Kathy, I have a comment. I only know of 2 types of exterior heaters, and maybe my knowledge is limited. One of them is a permanently mounted, that's typically mounted up high on a ceiling or on a structural member. Other is the kind we see at most restaurants, which is something that's mobile and it's ground-based. I would be a little concerned if we come back, because obviously you're going to want heat out at the perimeter. If this nice, clean system that's really detailed to hide the louvers, suddenly staff approves this mounted system that's out the perimeter, and it'll completely change the look. So I just, I'm happy to vote with the conditions, but I'm assuming Mr. Bean would not want that either. So I just to make you aware that that's a little bit of a concern.
Okay, thank you.
And just where are the lights? For me, if I come back to lights, the lights are in the beams or above. Are they in the fans? I mean, I didn't quite see where those were. Where are the lights on the building?
If you look at one of the photos in the drawing attachment we had, you can see the fans, and there's it looks like there's like can lights or some type of light on those beams where the fans aren't.
Yeah, I'm seeing that now. Yeah.
If I could share my screen, what's shown there now was part of our initial submission and not our final submission. So the actual fixture itself has changed, and I can show you where those reside. There we go. Okay. So this is actually the fixture that we ended up selecting for the final submission, and rather than being an LED puck that is just inserted into the bottom face of the aluminum beams, it's a can that is applied to the surface of it. That's going to help keep one's vision from actually seeing the hot spot of the fixture from angles. So if I flip through here, here is a picture of an installation of said fixture. Moving back to the plan, the renderings that were included in here were also older renderings, but there are two beam lines that run down break this thing into segments, and we have 2, 4, 6, 8. We have 12 of these cans placed with fans then, mounted in between. So, well, you can see the fan there.
Okay. So,
and again,
so you're really going to have a directed light. So you won't have extraneous light coming out. I'm saying going more toward the bridge. If you look in there, it's only going to reflect off the table. You're not going to have this scattering light into the neighborhood.
That's correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you.
And just one more question, because I'm looking, and if you look at the line of the system and the window, somehow, maybe I'm just looking at an old one. This is just right above the back windows, right?
It's actually at the transom line of the windows on the building, and I think that question is coming up later. Why can't this be pushed up?
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Entirely above the windows. So.
Okay, we'll come back to that.
Yep.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. Do we have any public comments?
We have no public comment.
All right. So we are ready for board discussion.
I'll go ahead because he already alluded to my my concern is that we're cutting off the top part of the window, and these aren't true transoms. They're just light divided, and so the width of the roof is actually wider than the light division, and so I just think it looks funny leaving part of the window exposed. So I'm wondering why we can't move the height up above the window.
So, while we're trying to make this structure as transparent as possible, it will diminish the amount of light that's coming into the space. So, we thought it was a really wise thing to do, in order to preserve some of the light, the natural light coming in from the east side of the building there through the transoms, to leave some portion of that open and still allow sight lines as well above the canopy to the sky. So we didn't want to completely cut off the view of the sky from the dining area there.
Yeah, if this were a new building, you would never put the roof of your patio 3/4 of the way up your window. And that's why I would really prefer it to be above the window.
Okay.
I just think it just would look more appropriate. Otherwise, I love the design of it. Everything about it is totally fine. The only other comment or question I have is if there's any intention at all to add any type of enclosure or shades to this, because I would hate to see shades go up or some type of plastic where you're trying to use this all year round. I definitely don't want to see that. I don't know if we can condition that we can't do that. If you ever came back and asked to enclose it, I wouldn't like it. That's my only concern. So
I'll speak to that. I've done enough of these meetings to know that asked and answered, and the answer is no. So no, we've tried to. We wanted, it's a beautiful view. It's a public-private view, and all the money that everyone has spent on this view, we want to be very, very respectful of that. And we designed this river patio knowing we didn't have the weather protection, but the reality is our Dublin neighbors are using it for dining. So we've searched for this solution. I mean, this isn't going to give us any weather protection. It's going to give us a little sun protection. And I say us, it's going to give our guests a little sun protection when the sun's directly overhead. And it's going to give us a little rain mist protection. And it's going to give us the heaters and the fans to move the air. the reality is our guests, as much as we wanted them to cocktail and lounge out there, they want to sit there for 3 hours and have an incredible evening. And this just adds a little more comfort to that experience. So no, the short answer, and I'm sorry for going on, is no, we have no intention of drop downs or anything like that.
And Nikki, is it even possible to put in the application that, or the lack of it not being there just means they can't do it?
No, you can condition that it be prohibited.
I just want to make sure if this client or this customer, if they, someone else, some other restaurant comes in here, they're not going to come in and put shades on all three sides of this. That's my only concern.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the procedure, if anybody wanted to do that, they would have to come back before a public body. Maybe the other thing to keep in mind for the Architecture Review Board, this is the last time you're probably ever going to see an application for this building, as it will no longer be under your jurisdiction. So if you'd like to condition something this evening, I would encourage you to do so.
Yeah, I would like to condition something or get something in the record that we have, or at least I have no intention of this ever becoming like a 3-season room or somehow permanently enclosed. And then my thought was the height should be raised, but we'll see what everyone else thinks.
I think I'll jump right in on with Amy. And I know we have critical eyes. So my first time I saw this, I was thinking the same thing. Why does it only go up 80% of the window? But then I also saw from the inside of, even though it's east facing, so you're not getting sun, you are getting more view of even probably the top of the bridge, the actual bridge element going up and so on. So I can see why you want to keep it. And actually, in an odd way, it almost makes it unique that you have a sort of bizarre, sort of fake transom light going across the top. So I see why you did that, and that it does make sense to me in that regards. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, I like the color. I like how it matches to the existing building. I like the pieces you're putting into it. And, you know, besides also just putting a caveat that we can't add screen shades or whatever you want to call them. I think it's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm the same. I mean, now I see why they want to do that. I understand why it looks. I can't decide if it looks good or bad. I'm still trying to process the transom line, but I had the same thought as Amy. Is I hate to come in one day and there be a big tarp hanging around on the side to keep the rain out. So I would fully agree if we say, just to make this, if somebody ever wanted to do something, they had to come back and convince somebody else. I think is certainly a condition that should be added if the on the application. But otherwise, I think it looks good, and I think it's a beautiful, I would say, from a dining experience, it's a beautiful space. So I tried to take advantage of it.
I agree with Amy. I do think it should be raised up because it also changes the reading of that back wall. You see a much taller facade along that back when you can see the entire windows. And I think when you're in that space and those louvers are shut, I don't think it's very respectful to the building. So I agree with Amy that I think it should be raised.
Okay. So my comments are pretty much the same. I had the same thought when I looked at it, as like, oh, I hope somebody doesn't try to wrap that in something. So I would like to add a condition for that specifically. So I guess we kind of have a divided board on raising to the height of the windows. So how do we proceed on that?
And Wayne, it looks like you have a question
Yeah.
or a comment.
If I could just add one small item, there is a practical element to the 11-foot height. The heaters provide little warmth above that height. We know from experience we have them in 11'6" and 12'6" ceilings. they don't provide the heat for dining in the fall and spring weather at a height above that. So that's why we zeroed in on the transom line in the design, one of the overwhelming reasons.
Actually, that brings up a good point then. So you're planning on mounting heaters on the ceiling? Because those are the kind I didn't want. As Gary mentioned earlier.
Yeah, that's a deal breaker for me.
Yeah, I was thinking the portable kind. I could go with those.
Yeah, I don't know if your fire department would agree with that. So
You have portable ones now.
I'm sorry?
You have portable ones out there now.
I don't know if we do or not. I apologize for not knowing that.
I do, because I've
Yeah.
eaten there.
No, you're right. We do at the rockers above the back wall. You are correct.
Honestly, I'd want to see what the ceiling design and what it would look like if you actually put those heaters in there.
Well, we have the exact heaters under the front entry canopy and under the north patio.
But where are they going to be mounted relative to this particular system? Are they going to be tucked up so their depth is the same depth as those beams, so it blocks the view? Which would
Correct.
be ideal, but I have a feeling, I think without seeing a cross section of how those are going to be mounted, I have a concern they're going to be sticking down and detract from your system.
Now, Carter, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're at the same plane as the beams.
So the beam depth is only 2 inches. So I think what we're going to have to do is increase the depth of or introduce deeper beams that are just inside of the gutter on each, well, let's see, it would be the east and west sides, so that we can recess those up into said beams.
Yeah,
not arm mounted hanging down from the
yeah,
street.
I don't want any heaters
No.
hanging down. Like, it needs to be recessed in the system that you've shown us in our presentation, in our picture, the one on that's showing now on the top right.
Top right.
There's no way you're going to mount heaters that wouldn't hang down from that.
No. So those box beams, those flat beams that run across, there's another row of those for the lights and the fans, right? And the idea would be to have those at the left and right side of that perspective view, but they would be, so in section there's a beam and then there's a gutter to capture the rain off of those louvers. We'd put another beam inside of those edges that's deep enough to take the housing of these heaters, which I think are about 5.5 inches deep. So they're not extremely deep fixtures, and as Wayne mentioned, it's exactly what we have in the canopy out front.
I'm having a hard time visualizing that now with a gutter. There's going to be a gutter in the middle.
Well, you don't see the gutter because it's all part of that that aluminum system.
So you're going to close those. When you close them, you're going to have some sort of channel that's going to direct rainwater someplace.
Right. Let me see if I can share my.
Yeah, I kind of was visualizing standalone heaters. That's what I had in mind when you were talking about it.
I was envisioning standalone. If you're, I would want to amend the condition to ensure that they were recessed into whatever system you had, and they weren't protruding or hanging down.
Right. So would you mind if I shared my screen one more time?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. So right now, what you see in the gray is all the structure that you've been seeing thus far. If I go to a section, and the red areas are the areas where I'm talking about an additional beam to house these heaters. And then of course the heaters are the dashed lines in those. So if I go to this section, this is out along the river. So there are 2 vertical aluminum beams that intersect with the post. And inside of that, there's a gutter system. So that all appears as one member with the brake metal. The beams that are in the center are purely there to hold the lights and the fans and have the wiring run down them. So because of the way this louvered system works and the depth of the heaters themselves, I think we're going to have a fatter horizontal beam that's not out to the edge, but that sits inside of the gutter so that the heater element itself can be recessed and housed inside of that. So it would run along the building and out along the face and be just deep enough, but in the same metal as the rest of the structure for us to recess those heaters.
Yeah, I totally get that. And I think if I got Nikki correct, this is our one chance to talk about this as a board, because as of next month, I don't think we will have any say on this as well. So I totally get the idea and like the idea of having a recessed heater built into the system. That would keep your sight lines much cleaner. I mean, way cleaner.
Yeah, as long as you go with this plan and they are recessed, I'm good. So I don't know if we have to slightly alter that condition to say that.
Yeah, I think we need to do that.
Because I don't think what he just showed us, that wasn't in the package of stuff. So if we can just modify the existing condition to say that we're going to use that recessed design, I'm totally fine.
Caveat or an addendum of some sort. Yeah.
Yep, I'm fine with that.
Okay. And these are, what kind of heaters are these?
They're Infratech heaters.
So,
and pardon me?
No, go ahead. So they're electric heaters?
They are electric heaters, yes.
Okay. And the color, I mean, they blend, I don't know what they look like, but so if we recess them,
really
it's not
won't
an
see
issue.
They'll be up. Yeah, you won't really see them except maybe an element.
Right.
If you look directly underneath it, if I'm getting this right, is the only way you'd see it, looking straight up.
Yeah, and the face is actually reflective, and that has to do with the output of the heat. So, while the beam itself will match, the face and the backing of the heating element is reflective.
Sure. I just want to make sure, because if you start to stick them under something and they build up heat, you're going to have an issue with them. You're going to have an issue with them amping out. So I'm not. It's hard for me to visualize exactly how the system works and fitting inside something that's going to house it.
I wish I had a picture underneath our front canopy, because the canopy is a dark color as well, and it has these exact heaters in them.
Okay. I mean, Nikki, if we make a condition, you guys can look at it just to make sure somehow it fits the spirit of what we're talking about. All right, I don't know. Who is
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we can modify that condition to require it to be recessed. And then obviously have that be in accordance with the Architecture Review Board's discussion, subject to staff approval.
Great. Okay. And this conversation does play also, as Wayne mentioned, into the overall height of the structure. So, we'd
froze up.
Yeah, I mean, the height's not a deal breaker. I just think it would look better if it was taller. But I think that overall, I like the patio.
The only thing I would add to that statement is maybe we make it clear that they're recessed into a housing with a finish on that housing that matches the rest of the patio structure. And I think that's what we're all talking about. I just want the language to be clear when we're going.
Exactly.
And I understand that it has to function, so I'm okay if they want to keep the height there.
Okay. So can we see the conditions as soon as you're ready?
Yes, give me 1 second. I'm sorry.
Sure. No, that's fine. There's been a lot of talk.
Mr. Alexander, could you repeat what you said just to make sure it was accurate with what I did? To recess the appropriate housing.
Recessed within a housing, the finish of that housing will match the finish of the beams and the structure.
Right.
You might add with recess in a housing with the finish and then the rest of the phrase will work.
Sounds like you spec'd this out before, Gary.
No, I've just been involved in a lot of wordsmithing, so no.
All right, Mr. Alexander, how does my wording look? I'm not sure if I got your. To work with staff to recess within the appropriate housing for outdoor heaters with the finish, subject to staff approval prior to submitting for building permits. Did I get the wording correct that you're looking for?
To recess within the appropriate housing for outdoor heaters, with a finished subject staff prior to submitting for building. Well,
I think finish match, right? That's what you want, Gary? You want to say finish match?
I think for finish, yeah. I mean,
I didn't catch it. I'm sorry. What did you say?
I was saying usually you would say like with the finish to match the remainder, the rest of the already existing
Match and finish.
structure. Yeah. Right. That's how
you might want to say to recess, change the wording. So to recess the outdoor heaters, because I think outdoor heaters is located in the wrong location. To recess the outdoor heaters, within a housing with a finish to match the existing beams.
Perfect.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bean had to wait around for all of this.
It would have been easier if I'd given you the right details in the first place.
No, maybe if you'd been first on the agenda.
Taught you a lesson.
To match.
I want to buy the house on agenda item number 2 if it ever comes up for sale.
Yeah. I think that's it.
Is the board satisfied with the conditions as is?
Yeah, I think you got it.
Finish to match within a housing with a finish to match the proposed structure. That's the whole thing. The finish needs to match the proposed structure.
There you go.
Good. Okay,
Good.
you got it.
Yep.
Thanks for your patience. Appreciate it.
No, you're fine. There were a lot of people talking. Okay, so I think we're ready for a vote. Do I have a motion to approve this minor project with the 3 conditions stated?
Sure, I'll make that motion to approve with 3 conditions.
Okay,
I'll second.
thank you.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes?
Miss Bryan,
Yes,
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Mr. Kanaki,
Yes.
Miss Cram,
Yes.
all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You.
All right, the next item we have, first of all, I wanted to make sure everybody knew that we did the second reading of our zoning and code changes was approved by City Council. So, and they've been very, very complimentary of the work that was done by this group. It's pretty much made everybody else's job easy. So I'm very appreciative of all of you. So the last item we have is the historic guidelines. This is an administrative request. This application is a request for review and a recommendation of approval to the Planning and Zoning Commission for the proposed final document for new historic design guidelines applicable to properties located within the Architectural Review District and its outlying historic properties. Ms. Martin will be our presenter for this.
Great. Good evening. I do not have a PowerPoint presentation this evening, but I will be kind of verbally walking you through a few things. And like Ms. Bryan said, the Architectural Review Board code, as well as the Historic Dublin area rezoning were both before City Council on Monday night. City Council was exceptionally complimentary of you all, as well as all the other boards and commissions. And I think this entire process is a testament to Dublin and how engaged the community has been over the last 3 years. So this is really the final component of this project. These are the historic design guidelines. These design guidelines are proposed to replace the existing design guidelines, which have been in place for a number of years. The intent of the guidelines is to provide direction on how to administer the code. Will specifically be used by both staff and the Architecture Review Board on a kind of day-to-day basis, but will also be provided to residents and property owners to better understand how they may develop in the district or preserve existing structures. So with that, at the November meeting, you all reviewed this and provided input that there were opportunities for improvement, specifically within the architectural styles and building types section. With some previous revisions that staff had made, I believe there was a lack of differentiation between architectural styles and building types. At the board's suggestion, staff did consult Stephen Gordon's How to Complete the Ohio historic assessment. And that is really important because our document now aligns with the building types and architectural styles recognized by the State Historic Preservation Office. So you don't see all of the academic styles that were previously included. And I think this really fulfills also the board's objective of ensuring this is a user-friendly document. So I am, happy to walk you through some of those changes if you have specific questions. Otherwise, I would just leave it at thanking you all for providing input, one-on-one in advance of this meeting. It really has helped to ensure it is a complete document. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. So not being an architect or a preservationist, I did not participate in the latest, but I have to tell you, this document is amazing. It's like a layman's guide. I learned from reading this. I really did. I learned from reading this, some of the things that were kind of hazy. So I am very grateful to all of you for lending your expertise to this document. I think this is something other cities could emulate.
Well, I'm glad it worked because I know I made a big fuss over it last time. So I'm glad for someone who doesn't know this stuff, it was made sense to you.
It absolutely did. It absolutely did. So.
Hey, Amy, a question in that. Is Edwardian a style recognized in the United States officially? Because I know it's a British term that refers to a certain period.
Yeah,
and I always think it was Edwardian, but
it's not used for Ohio architecture.
I didn't think so. That's what that was my gut feeling on that, just out of curiosity.
Yeah, it's just not. We don't have anything old enough.
Well, we almost do. I mean, the school almost is sort of. I mean, it'd be the end of it'd be past Edwardian just a bit, I guess. But
so it sounds like you want to add that.
Yeah, no, let's not change it.
No.
If you can redo it all and come back next time.
Yeah, no. Put him on mute, please.
No, just a curiosity question if that was official. And Amy, I knew Amy would know.
It's not one of the, so if you go to register something on Ohio Historic Inventory form, it's not one of the options. There's always an other and you can type other in, but it's not one of the, I don't know, 50 some styles they have. It's not one of them.
Right. I've seen them on like the 109s we have to do in some other forms.
Yeah.
So were there any public comments on this?
We have no additional public comment on this evening.
Okay. All right. Any other comments, conversations, questions? Can we put this baby to bed?
I feel like it's a yes.
All right. Can I get a motion to recommend approval to the Planning and Zoning Commission for the administrative request for the new historic design guidelines?
I can make the motion to do all of what you just said there. I'm not going to be able to repeat it.
Do I get a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Miss Bryan,
Yes.
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes.
Ms. Cram,
Yes.
Mr. Kanaki.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks for putting up with all my comments, Nikki.
Oh my gosh, it is.
We owe you a debt of gratitude for your patience and your grace and your sense of humor.
It's just so funny because the day you sent that to me to revise, I was in like over my head. I was just finishing a report where I had to sort out 486 buildings and put them into types. And so I had all those definitions like right in front of me.
Perfect timing.
Yep.
All right. So the last item we have this evening is under communications. Do you do this, Nikki, or do no? I guess I do this. The 2020 ARB annual report. Each year, the Architectural Review Board prepares an annual report highlighting the board's workload, accomplishments, and challenges. Subsequently, the report is forwarded to City Council for their awareness. And Ms. Martin will provide a brief overview of the report that was in your packet. And our request is to accept the report tonight.
Yeah. So as Kathy had mentioned, this is an annual endeavor by the Architecture Review Board and is intended to provide a line of communication to City Council. This item is actually a requirement of your rules and regulations, and is why we help you all undertake this on an annual basis. So the report that has been prepared highlights a number of items, primarily the workload, as well as some challenges. And oftentimes we talk about continuing education, although with the need to adapt and think on our feet, I feel like virtual meetings are our continuing education for 2020. So the couple things that I did want to highlight for you in the report is, over this past year, I'm sure you all felt it, but there was a significant amount of work that you all did. So in 2020, you all accepted 45 new applications or new cases. On your agendas, there were 62 agenda items in 2020. And of those agenda items, obviously a number of them were informal reviews, but the Architecture Review Board issued 30 board orders of approval. And we did provide a 5-year context for these numbers on page 7 of your annual report. We felt like this was extraordinarily important, and this was actually the recommendation of Kathy. But anecdotally, I will tell you that, when I started with the city, the Architectural Review Board meeting was canceled on a regular basis. There were very few applications that on a monthly basis needed to be reviewed by the Architectural Review Board. So the type of work you're doing, the volume of work you're doing, and the quality of work that you are all doing has dramatically shifted over the last 5 years. So I know at a staff level, we truly appreciate your time and dedication to this endeavor.
Does that include a merit pay raise?
I think it should.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of talking to City Council about that. So.
Yeah, so as you may know, certain boards and commissions, do have a stipend for their time. So, okay. So with that, we would be happy to answer any questions. We hope this was informative and is reflective of all your work. If not, we are certainly happy to accept revisions tonight. So thank you.
Yes, I've already sent some revisions. I didn't realize you all were going to do your bios in first person. So where I came from, you never did that. So I revised mine to first person. Nikki already has that. And in my letter, I was a little redundant with the term not only, so I did a revision to that.
So I think it looks good.
So do we make a motion to accept it? Is that what this is about, basically?
We vote to affirm acceptance.
Yeah,
Or-
so we actually, we don't need a formal vote. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Good.
everybody
I'm
okay
good.
with sending this forward?
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Awesome. All right. Any other communication, Nikki?
We do not have any communication, but it looks like Sean might.
I do. I just because and I don't know if this is the right form. The first case just the way it went. How do we, when there are bigger cases like that? I mean, because everybody was being involved and it comes to us kind of at a late stage. And I'm not talking maybe about this one, but you can see from the applicant, certainly he was deflated, probably is an understatement about how he felt after that. And I have to admit, it felt like I don't know how much conversation was going on in the background when you see it. I saw it on Friday and I thought, well, this is the interesting thing. And when they come to us and it ends up, as Gary said, there's a lot of variance, all the things that were going to be needed to make that go through, trying to get a better understanding. I have to feel, I felt like it didn't feel like a good contextual way to approach that. So for me, I'm not sure I understand. If they're working out for that amount of time, and then I have to say, I felt like we really denigrated what he was trying to accomplish. And I don't think that was any of our points, but certainly there's a lot of stuff in there that was going to need a lot of revision. And when it came to us, it felt like we almost ambushed how he was trying to approach that. So I'm just trying to contextualize if they come back. Is there a way to, how do we do that in a better way to make sure that it doesn't go like that? Huh?
Gary, did you have a comment?
I do.
Jenny, I want you to talk, but
Gary, you go first. Yeah.
I have a couple of things to say, and it pertains to this and the hotel project last year. What they presented is an enormous investment of time and resources for those people. And I sympathize because I know what's involved, and it shouldn't have gotten it well, and I'm not sure who's to blame, but they could have tested those things with us with massing studies and things that were much less involved in terms of the amount of time it takes to make drawings like that and make renderings like that. And the same issue was, and I recused myself from the hotel, but I did read the text, and that one also was an extremely elaborate presentation for a conceptual review, which wouldn't have been necessary to get the kind of feedback that they received. So I don't know if now we're hearing things, and I think it's good to hear from Jenny and Nikki on this, because we're hearing things suggesting where what they were told by staff, which may or may not be accurate. And then they're making it sound like, well, we assume this was pre-approved. That's probably not the case, although when I'm as a design professional, when I go in and represent a client and I'm talking to staff, they will tell me in other communities, now I do very little work here, but in other communities, the staff will tell me, they'll say, we would support this, and I'll know, or they will say, here's the history in projects like this, so I will know. And they'll also say, this is going to be, you've got some challenges here. So, and I don't know, and perhaps I don't know if that occurs here. That as a person representing clients, it makes a big difference, and that's why I try to encourage him and the people with that house last time. Just because that was for conceptual review, they did a lot. The addition that was bigger than the house. I tried to encourage them, come back. It could be simpler, and we can talk about what you're doing. But I don't know if it's the first time they talk to staff. Maybe we could be involved. I don't know if there's an answer.
Let's let Jenny talk about the history, because there is history with this.
I guess I want to be mindful, because this is an open application. So I guess maybe I'll speak generally about how we handle applications. And I did try to chime in, particularly related to the demolition discussion or conversation that was brought forward. And then of course I lost connection at that exact moment, so I wasn't able to chime in during that case. But I mean, when we meet with applicants, we meet with them multiple times, and in this instance and in every instance, we would share the same advice that you just said, Mr. Alexander. Do not produce that level of detail of drawings, particularly for a larger redevelopment project. It is impressed upon applicants that you should go sooner before you spend all this time and effort and money coming to the board with this level of detail, because of this exact potential outcome that you all want to provide that feedback honestly to them, and them not have invested all that along the way. So we're very clear about that. We are also very clear with applicants that the historic inventory and the assessment are pieces of the puzzle in which you all review and make the determination based on criteria. So every application for every person is this: you bring this forward, you get feedback from the board, and they make the final decision. Staff does not say ever that yes, you're going to get approval for this or not, because we don't know. You all have different opinions. That's the reason you're on this board, for you all to review that with your expertise and your input and provide their recommendations. So that is the case no matter who the applicant is or what the circumstance is. So I want that to be clear, that under no circumstances are we telling people, oh yeah, go forth and this is a done deal. That's not, I mean, that's not our role. We recommend to you all, and you all have been appointed by council to carry out those goals and policies and meeting the code requirements and to make those determinations. That's not staff's role. And we don't agree sometimes, which is good and healthy. That makes for a great discussion. We also are very clear with applicants about past applications and the outcomes of those, as well as recent discussions and the recent code requirements. Those are always shared with people up front. Here's what the board has discussed previously and what their concerns are, either related to projects within the vicinity or even elsewhere in the district. These are the concerns raised, and you need to be mindful of that. So that is also then on them to hear us, understand, and then make revisions or not, and come forth with something for you all to react to. So that's how we handle that when we meet with applicants. And we do encourage people to come in early before, I mean, they meet with us before they submit. That makes life much easier for everybody, so that we can help guide them before they do put a lot of time and effort into that.
And I think the increase in the informal reviews shows that, I think that's evidence of your recommendations to come to us early. So.
Nikki, is there anything else you wanted to add?
I mean, I guess the only thing that I would add is maybe just from an educational standpoint, and I know that you all as board members are aware of this, although now that we're live streamed, it may be a good opportunity for some of the members of our community to know. But the way that we bring materials forward, certainly we are supporting you. However, our staff report is one independent review. We consult with a consultant to provide you another independent perspective. The staff report is not right or wrong. The consultant is not right or wrong. And then the kind of third bucket is the public comment. You being an appointed body have the benefit of public comment, which staff does not. And so when you take all of these items, including codes, plans, policies, the historic and cultural assessment, you all are tasked with the really, really, really challenging you know, endeavor of sorting through all these bits and pieces and then coming to a conclusion. So I think, you know, sometimes there can be a misconception that, you know, staff's opinion is the only opinion, or the board must agree with staff's recommendation. You know, staff is here to serve and support you all, as well as to serve and support the community. And, you know, we do have professional expertise, but the reason that you all have been appointed by council is to lend your perspective, and you all, you know, bring something valuable. So thank you.
Does that help, Sean?
Yeah. For me, it's just because I think as Gary said, yeah, that helps. I mean, for me, I think I was pretty sure that's how it was going, but they really came, as Gary said, it was quite elaborate, which is okay at an early stage. But okay.
It seems to me sometimes applicants come hoping they'll get told something different, I guess, because nothing we told them was new. I mean, the staff report said 2.5 stories. They said the code said 2.5 stories. The same application was on our agenda a month ago. They knew 2.5 stories because the planning report said that. So, you know, sometimes they say, okay, well, I still want to see what they have to say. So, although he appeared shocked that we were saying 2.5 stories, it wasn't new information.
Yeah, and with
Go ahead.
that, we should probably
happen. Oh, go ahead, Nikki.
Yeah, no, you go.
That people, and that is their right to bring something forward, right? That to your point, Amy, right? That they can bring it forward and ask. And again, those applicants, you know, are also given the same information. So about what the code says, right? That's where you start. What does the code? What does the code even say?
That's why I asked that question a couple of times.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, this is good dialogue, and maybe we can talk further. I think we are looking at one of your upcoming meetings to sort of talk about things that are concerning to you, or how you want to approach certain things. So maybe this is something that we, you know, need to talk about a little bit more about what we would, the level of detail that we allow people to come forth with informals. I don't know. Maybe that's something to
or
talk
a separate meeting.
Right.
Have a special separate zone meeting just about that if you want.
I think the other thing that we should talk about, it's kind of been raised a couple of times, is the do people still see a value in the independent consultant report? So add that to the list of things we will talk about.
Yeah, we'll come with
you're spending money on that. If people aren't getting any value out of it, then let's not make that expense. I find it valuable because I'm the least schooled in architecture and construction, but no,
yeah,
I'm one person.
That's good. Yeah, well, we can definitely prepare some things to talk through and get everyone's perspective moving forward this year. We just want to make sure we're preparing you, as Nikki said, the best we can to make your decisions, because it is hard to sit there and take all the pieces and be the ones that have to voice, you know, and carry that forward. So we want you to be prepared.
Yeah, but we have some awesome documents to work with now.
True, all your hard work paid off for sure.
I have to admit, I never feel underprepared. So for me,
Okay.
Jenny and
Maybe
Nikki,
it's too
I have to
much.
admit, no, it's not. That one, the first one, you needed all. I needed all of that to make sure I was in the right place. So
and Jenny, since I work in government already, if you can get me more documents, you know, I like some.
Oh, definitely. Just for the sake of, we can.
I never can have enough.
Okay, paper. All right, got you.
All right. If there's nothing else, anything else? Okay.
Thank you all.
Well, I will adjourn this meeting. So if everybody could just stay put until the live stream ends.